Chapter 135. Thinking of this, Zhang Laji was even more certain that the blueprint was stolen by Lu Huarong. Thinking of this, Zhang Laji looked at Lu Huarong and asked with a smile, "Junior brother Lu, is there anything wrong with what I said?" Hearing this, Lu Huarong shook his head. "Third senior brother, I wouldn't dare to say that you're wrong, but think about it. None of us know where the blueprint is hidden. Even if you want us to steal it, where would we go to steal it?" Speaking of this, Lu Huarong cupped his fist towards Zhang Laji and said, "Third senior brother, am I right? Even if you want us to steal the blueprint now, where would we go to steal it if we don't know where the treasure is hidden?" After hearing Lu Huarong's words, Zhang Laji became even more suspicious of him. Lu Huarong kept saying that if he didn't know where the treasure was hidden, there was no way to steal it. This should be a way for him to justify himself. Thinking of this, Zhang Laji smiled and nodded. "Junior brother Lu is right. If we don't know where the treasure is hidden, we really can't find the blueprint." At this point, Zhang Laji looked at Lu Huarong. After a while, he continued, "However, if I really want to steal the blueprint, I think that if I observe Master's movements carefully, I should be able to find the location of the treasure. After all, Master can't always be on guard against us disciples. There are times when he relaxes, and some people secretly investigate the location of the treasure when Master is relaxed." Speaking of this, Zhang Laji stared at Lu Huarong. After a long while, he continued, "Junior brother, do you think there's such a possibility?" After hearing Zhang Laji's words, Lu Huarong couldn't help but look to the side. He was only stunned for a moment before he nodded and replied, "Senior brother, I don't think such a thing would happen." Hearing this, Zhang Laji looked at Lu Huarong with a faint smile and continued to ask, "Junior brother Lu, you said maybe, but is there really no possibility of it happening? Is there really no one secretly observing the location of the treasure when Master isn't paying attention?" Hearing Zhang Laji's continuous questioning, Lu Huarong was obviously a little flustered. He hurriedly nodded and said, Maybe something like that will happen." Hearing this, Zhang Laji sneered in his heart. He was even more suspicious of this junior brother of his. Seeing Lu Huarong's nervous expression, Zhang Laji was about to ask again when Bai Jinmu, who had been silent all this time, suddenly stood up. He stretched out his hand and lightly knocked on the table. When Zhang Laji looked over, he smiled. "Third senior brother, it's inappropriate for you to be so overbearing." After listening to Bai Jinmu's words, Zhang Laji was stunned. He immediately reacted and knew that his actions were a bit too hasty. Even if he had doubts about Lu Huarong, he shouldn't have questioned him like this. Thinking of this, Zhang Laji smiled. "Junior brother Bai, this is my temper. It's not like you don't know me. As long as there's something I want to say, I'll say it." Hearing this, Bai Jinmu only snorted coldly. "Third senior brother, you're asking as if junior brother Lu was the one who stole the blueprint. Could it be that you're suspecting junior brother Lu?" Hearing this, Zhang Laji smiled awkwardly. He turned to look at Lu Huarong and said, "Junior brother Lu, don't be nervous. As long as you didn't do it, no one will suspect you." After hearing Zhang Laji's words, Lu Huarong hurriedly nodded. "Third senior brother, I understand. Bai Jinmu turned to look at Tang Jinan and said with a smile, "Second senior brother, what do you mean?" Tang Jinan hurriedly stood up and said with a smile, "We've already investigated this matter. What's there to be suspicious about? Only junior brother Yi knows where Master hid the drawings. No one else knows where he hid them. Now that they've gone missing, Yi Xian is the one who's going to be suspicious." Speaking up to this point, Tang Jinan turned to look at Zhang Laji and said with a smile, "Third junior brother, don't you think so?" Hearing this, Zhang Laji shook his head. "Yi Xian does know where Master hid the blueprint, but what evidence do we have to prove that he stole it?" After hearing Zhang Laji's words, Tang Jinan was slightly taken aback. Then, he said with a smile, "Third junior brother, isn't that evidence enough?" Hearing this, Zhang Laji shook his head. Just the fact that Yi Xian instructed Master to hide the blueprint is indeed not enough evidence. Tang Jinan said, "Then, what other evidence does third junior brother need?" Zhang Laji sighed. At the very least, someone must have seen Yi Xian steal the blueprint. Or there must be something that can prove that Yi Xian stole it. Only then can we prove that Yi Xian stole it. After hearing Zhang Liji's words, Tang Jianan could not help but frown. He turned to look at Bai Jianmu, but did not say a word. When Bai Jianmu saw Tang Jianan looking at him, he smiled and asked, "Second senior brother, do you know where Master hid the blueprint?" When Tang Jianan heard this, he shook his head. How would I know where Master hid the blueprint? After hearing Tang Jianan's words, Bai Jianmu turned to look at Zhang Liji and asked, "Third senior brother, do you know where Master hid the blueprint?" Zhang Liji shook his head. I don't know. Master never mentioned it before. Naturally, I wouldn't investigate. After hearing Zhang Liji's words, Bai Jianmu turned to look at Lu Huarong and asked, "Junior brother Lu, do you know where Master hid the blueprint?" When Lu Huarong heard this, he was instantly shocked. He hurriedly shook his head and replied, "I don't know. I really don't know." Bai Jianmu nodded and turned to look at Mei Guangji. He asked, "Seventh junior brother, do you know where Master hid the blueprint?" When Mei Guangji heard this, he shook his head. I don't know. After hearing Mei Guangji's words, Bai Jianmu nodded and turned to look at Li Shuiyan. He asked, "Eighth junior sister, do you know where Master hid the blueprint?" Li Shuiyan was young and introverted. She didn't answer Bai Jianmu's question. She only shook her head slightly as an answer. Bai Jianmu nodded. Finally, he turned to look at LV Wenkong. He cupped his hands at LV Wenkong before asking with a smile, "Eldest senior brother, do you know where the blueprints are?" When LV Wenkong heard this, he said unhappily, "Of course I don't know. What's the point of knowing that?" After hearing Li Wenkong's words, Bai Jianmu finally turned to look at Zhang Liji and said coldly, "Third senior brother, you heard it. No one knows where Master hid the blueprint. If it wasn't Yi Xian who stole the blueprint, who else could it be?" When Zhang Liji heard Bai Jianmu's question and heard Bai Jianmu's words, he felt uneasy. Bai Jianmu had already asked everyone about this matter. Everyone replied that they didn't know where the blueprint was placed. Chapter 136. Bai Jianmu had already asked everyone once. If he raised any more questions, he was afraid that he would offend all of them. Thinking of this, Zhang Liji secretly cursed Bai Jianmu for being cunning, but there was nothing he could do. He could only continue. "Junior brother Bai, I feel that it's a little unfair to say that Yi Xian stole the blueprint just because he knew where it was hidden." Bai Jianmu heard Zhang Liji's words and sneered. "Third senior brother, do you think it's fair to suspect your own fellow disciple?" Bai Jianmu paused for a moment before he continued. "Third senior brother, I know that you have a good relationship with senior brother Yi. However, even if you do, you can't take this as proof that he didn't steal the blueprint." Zhang Liji was stunned when he heard this. Before he could react, Bai Jianmu continued, "Third senior brother, I don't mind that you have a good relationship with senior brother Yi. That's your personal matter, and I can't interfere. However, you want to offend Yi Xian just because of your personal relationship?" Bai Jianmu's tone turned cold. "Third senior brother, I will never allow you to frame another fellow disciple just because you want to offend Yi Xian." After Bai Jianmu finished speaking, Lu Huarong hurriedly added, "That's right, third senior brother. I know that you have a good relationship with senior brother Yi, but even so, it doesn't mean that senior brother Yi didn't steal the blueprint." At this moment, Zhang Liji was already feeling extremely embarrassed. He only wanted to help Yi Xian get away with it. He really didn't think of anything else. Now that the two of them had put it this way, it seemed like he was trying to clear Yi Xian's name by deliberately framing his fellow disciples. After a while, Zhang Liji slowly said, "I didn't mean that. I really just feel that it's a little unfair to say that Yi Xian stole the blueprint just because he knew where it was hidden." After Bai Jianmu heard Zhang Liji's words, he sneered and shook his head. He turned his head and glanced at the other disciples around him. Then, he said loudly, "Third senior brother, you feel sorry for Yi Xian. Then, let me ask you, are you worthy of your fellow disciples by doing this?" At this point, Bai Jianmu turned to look at Lu Huarong and asked loudly, "Junior brother Lu, third senior brother suspects you. Do you think he did the right thing?" Hearing this, Lu Huarong hurriedly said loudly, "As my third senior brother, it stands to reason that I, as your junior brother, shouldn't say anything." However, none of us know where the blueprint is hidden. Even if we were to steal it, where would we go to steal it? At this point, Lu Huarong turned to look at Zhang Liji and asked, "Third senior brother, tell me. We don't even know where the blueprints are hidden. Where are we supposed to steal them?" In the face of Bai Jianmu and Lu Huarong's repeated accusations, Zhang Liji was speechless for a moment. Seeing that Zhang Liji was silent, Tang Jinan also stood up and turned to look at Bai Jianmu and Lu Huarong. He said with a smile, "Junior brother Bai, junior brother Lu, don't be anxious. Junior brother Zhang is probably anxious and worried about junior brother Yi." That's what he said. At this point, Tang Jinan's gaze turned to Zhang Liji again. He said with a smile, "Third junior brother, although I can't say that junior brother Yi definitely stole the blueprint. Other than Master, no one else knows where the blueprint is hidden except for Yixian. Now that the blueprint is missing, the biggest suspect is naturally Yixian. Third junior brother, you shouldn't have any doubts about this, right?" Hearing this, Zhang Liji nodded. "Second senior brother, what you said makes sense. Junior brother Yi is indeed the only one who knows where the blueprint is hidden. However, it seems a little too arbitrary for us to assume that junior brother Yi stole the blueprint based on this point alone." When Tang Jinan heard this, he shook his head and said disapprovingly, "What's so arbitrary about this? Just like what junior fellow apprentice Lu said just now, none of us know the location of the blueprint. Even if you want us to steal it, where can we steal it?" After hearing Tang Jinan's words, Zhang Liji shook his head. "Second senior brother, you're wrong. I always think that it's too unfair for junior brother Yi to assume that he stole the blueprint just because he knows where the blueprint is hidden." Hearing this, Tang Jinan smiled and shook his head. "Third junior brother, since the blueprint wasn't stolen by Yixian, who do you think stole it?" Hearing this, Zhang Liji was stunned. He thought to himself, "What should I say? Should I point out who stole the blueprint? However, I don't know how to point out who stole the blueprint." Seeing that Zhang Liji didn't answer, Tang Jinan continued to ask, "Junior brother Zhang, why don't you tell me who took the blueprint?" Speaking up to this point, Tang Jinan paused for a moment before continuing, "Junior brother Zhang, as long as you tell me who stole the blueprint, don't worry, I definitely won't let him off. I must make him hand over the blueprint." Hearing this, Zhang Liji subconsciously glanced at his fellow disciples around him. Seeing Zhang Liji's gaze, everyone was a little unhappy. No one liked the feeling of being suspected for no reason. In particular, eldest senior brother LV Wenkong was even more annoyed. It didn't matter who stole the blueprints, but it was a big problem for him to be suspected of being the culprit. LV Wenkong could swear that he definitely didn't take the blueprint because there was no need for him to do so. If he wanted to see the blueprint, as long as he told his master, there was no reason for his master to not let him see it. This was because Sun Xinjing knew that his eldest disciple didn't have any other hobbies. His only hobby was to study mechanism techniques. Sun Xinjing trusted such a person very much. Moreover, Sun Xinjing also planned that even if LV Wenkong didn't say anything, he would share this blueprint with his eldest disciple in a few days and study it together. The blueprint sent by his master was extensive and profound. It was a pioneer in mechanism studies. How could such a good thing be studied in a short period of time? Only by studying it together with others could he speed up the research. Seeing Zhang Liji's gaze, LV Wenkong snorted heavily and said unhappily, "Junior brother Zhang, are you suspecting me?" Hearing this, cold sweat broke out on Zhang Liji's forehead. No matter how easygoing LV Wenkong was, he was still the eldest disciple of the South County branch. If he got angry, no one would dare to disobey him. From LV Wenkong's expression, Zhang Liji could tell that he was a little unhappy. Zhang Liji also knew why LV Wenkong was unhappy. No matter who it was, if they were suspected by others, they would definitely be unhappy unless they were a fool. Seeing that his eldest senior brother was angry, Zhang Liji quickly cupped his fists and smiled apologetically. "Eldest senior brother, I didn't mean that. I just wanted to hear your suggestion." Chapter 137. After listening to Zhang Liji's explanation, LV1 Kong nodded in satisfaction and asked, Junior brother Zhang, what advice do you want to hear? Zhang Leji hurriedly said, Eldest senior brother, I think it's unreasonable to assume that the blueprint was stolen just because Yi Xian knows the location of the hidden treasure. Eldest senior brother, what do you think? LV1 Kong shook his head after listening to Zhang Leji's words. Junior brother Zhang, even if that's the case, Junior brother Bai has already asked everyone. If no one knows where the blueprint is hidden, how can they steal it? Zhang Leji shook his head. Although Junior brother Yi knows where Master hid the blueprint, eldest senior brother, you also know Junior brother Ye's character. Do you think Junior brother Yi is the kind of person who would steal the blueprint? This time, before LV Wenkong could answer, Bai Jimu spoke first. Third senior brother, you're wrong. As the saying goes, you may know a person for a long time without understanding his true nature. How can it be possible to tell whether a person is a good or bad person just by looking at their appearance? At this point, Bai Jimu turned to look at his eldest senior brother LV Wenkong, cupped his fists, and said with a smile, Eldest senior brother, don't you think I'm right? If we could determine whether a person is a bad person just by looking at his appearance, then isn't this a little too childish? LV Wenkong nodded after listening to Bai Jimu's words. Junior brother Bai is right. You may know a person for a long time without understanding his true nature. It's indeed impossible to tell whether a person is a good person just by looking at their appearance. At this point, LV Wenkong turned to look at Zhang Leji and said earnestly, Third junior brother, don't let your emotions get the better of you. You can't judge the situation based on what you've done. That will delay a lot of things. Zhang Leji nodded and cupped his fists at LV Wenkong. He said, Eldest senior brother is right. Junior brother has learned a lot. LV Wenkong nodded in satisfaction after seeing this scene. He didn't say anything because he couldn't say anything. His mind was filled with all kinds of mechanism techniques. He really wasn't in the mood to talk about these boring things with these junior brothers. If it wasn't for Zhang Leji's words that made him unhappy, he wouldn't even want to say these words. At this moment, Zhang Leji was hesitating. To be honest, his relationship with Yi Xian wasn't the best. The person who had the best relationship with Yi Xian was his seventh junior brother, Mei Guangji. Zhang Leji had his own reasons for telling his master about his suspicions. He had already vaguely guessed that there must be some kind of trick involved. If Yi Xian was expelled from the sect, he might be the next one to be expelled. Since eldest senior brother did not care about anything, he would not be a threat to anyone. Naturally, no one would go against him. Second senior brother Tang Jinan's performance just now made Zhang Leji somewhat suspicious of his motives. In the South County branch, Zhang Leji believed that he had the best relationship with Tang Jinan. When the two of them had nothing to do, they would always get together for a drink or two. However, he didn't expect that Tang Jinan would actually target him today. Although it wasn't the kind of tit for tat, it had already expressed his intentions in the open and in the dark. Seeing Tang Jinan's behavior, while Zhang Leji was surprised, he also suspected why Tang Jinan would do this. Or rather, what benefits would this bring him? Thinking of this, Zhang Leji's heart suddenly sank, and a bad thought appeared in his mind. Could it be that Tang Jinan stole the blueprint? As soon as this thought appeared, Zhang Leji hurriedly shook his head and rejected it. Although Tang Jinan was also talented in the study of mechanisms, he did not have any advantage compared to the other seniors and juniors in the sect. On the contrary, his talent in the study of mechanisms was inferior to Yi Xian and Bai Jinmu. Although he was older than the two of them, he was behind them in the study of mechanisms. Tang Jinan was older than Zhang Leji, but in terms of skill, Tang Jinan's skill might not be higher than Zhang Leji's. Tang Jinan's skill level determined his position in the Tianji sect. It could be said that regardless of whether Yi Xian or Bai Jinmu became a branch leader, it would not be his turn to become a branch leader. It could even be said that even if Zhang Leji became a branch leader, Tang Jinan would still not be a branch leader. During this period, Tang Jinan was in this awkward situation. What Zhang Leji didn't understand was why Tang Jinan would do this. Although Tang Jinan didn't say it explicitly, he had already expressed it very clearly. The blueprint was stolen by Yi Xian. This was definitely not wrong. However, On what basis did Tang Jianan say that the blueprint was definitely stolen by Yi Xian? Or could it be that Tang Jianan had some evidence to prove that the blueprint was stolen by Yi Xian? Thinking of this, Zhang Leji was even more confused. Even if Tang Jianan had evidence, why didn't he say it? Or could it be that there was another possibility? Thinking of this, Zhang Leji subconsciously glanced at Tang Jianan and then at Bai Jianmu. His heart suddenly moved. Could it be that Tang Jianan had already joined forces with Bai Jianmu? This possibility was not impossible. Zhang Leji thought about it carefully. This possibility was very possible. If Yi Xian was expelled from the sect, Zhang Leji guessed that the next leader of the South County branch would be Bai Jianmu. If Bai Jianmu became the leader of the South County branch, other than those who were on his side, everyone else would probably be suppressed by him. For example, Han Jiqing had already told Zhang Leji about what happened today. Through this matter, Zhang Leji could already feel that Bai Jianmu seemed to want to make a move on him. A few days ago, Bai Jianmu had personally come to visit him. Zhang Leji could also understand the meaning behind his words. Bai Jianmu wanted him to support him as the leader, but he did not agree to it. Perhaps it was because of this reason that Bai Jianmu wanted to suppress him. He did not do anything wrong usually. If Bai Jianmu used Yi Xian's matter to suppress him and implicate him, if this matter was confirmed, he would probably not be able to stay in the South County branch anymore. Thinking of this, Zhang Leji had some understanding in his heart. He glanced at Tang Jianan and then at Lu Huarong, guessing in his heart. Could it be that these two people were already connected to Bai Jianmu? If that was the case, then it would be too terrifying. If the three of them were to work together, they would be a powerful force. Eldest senior brother did not participate in the competition, nor did he make any suggestions. He could be excluded. Yi Xian was locked in the repentance pavilion. Even if he wanted to say something different, it was impossible. The only people left were him, Mei Guangji, and Li Shuyan. Mei Guangji's words basically did not have much influence. It could be said that even if he said something, no one would listen. Li Shuyan was too young, and she had not been in the sect for long. Her words did not have much influence. Chapter 138. Zhang Leji thought about it carefully in his heart. If Bai Jianmu, Tang Jianan, and Lu Huarong joined forces, their strength would be the greatest force in the South County branch. If Bai Jianmu became the leader of the South County branch, other than the three of them, the rest of the people would have to surrender to their camp. Otherwise, they would not be able to survive in the South County branch. Thinking of this, Zhang Leji was shocked. He didn't expect that such a big change would happen between the eight of them without anyone noticing. Now, Zhang Leji understood that if Bai Jianmu became the leader of the South County branch, even he would not be safe. Thinking of this, Zhang Leji was secretly shocked. At the same time, he also understood that when his master resigned from his position as the leader, it would be his last chance to make a choice. Whether he chose Bai Jianmu or Yi Xian, that day would be the final deadline. Seeing that Zhang Leji did not answer for a long time, Bai Jianmu sneered. Third senior brother, do you still think that Yi Xian did not steal the blueprint? After hearing Bai Jianmu's question, Zhang Leji hesitated for a moment, but he still said, Junior brother Bai, I still think that it's unfair to assume that Yi Xian stole the blueprint just based on this point. Therefore, I want to ask everyone to investigate this matter properly. After Bai Jianmu heard Zhang Leji's words, he could not help but laugh out loud. He pointed at Zhang Leji and looked at the other brothers. He said with a smile, Did you see that? Third senior brother is suspecting you now. Shouldn't you do something to prove yourselves? When everyone heard this, their hearts skipped a beat. Lu Huarong had already stood up. He looked at Zhang Leji and cupped his fists. Then, he asked, Third senior brother, are you suspecting all of us? Or do you think that only Yi Xian would not steal the blueprint? Do you think that the rest of us might have stolen the blueprint? Seeing how this usually taciturn junior brother of his was like a completely different person today, his words sharp and incisive, Zhang Leji was a little speechless. From his point of view, whether or not Yi Xian could become a branch master was not the most important thing. They were all fellow disciples. If Yi Xian really did not steal the blueprint, Then he had to prove it to clear his name. However, he did not expect that such a simple matter would be fraught with difficulties. Even the usually silent Lu Huarong had jumped out to oppose him. Thinking up to this point, Zhang Laji narrowed his eyes and looked at Lu Huarong in front of him. He was even more puzzled, and he was even more certain that his thoughts were correct. If there were no accidents, this Lu Huarong should have already connected with Bai Jianmu. Otherwise, he wouldn't speak so unscrupulously. He didn't have any scruples towards his third senior brother. Seeing that Zhang Laji was looking at him without saying anything, Lu Huarong felt a little guilty. He subconsciously looked away, but his mouth still spoke. Third senior brother, are you suspecting me? Do you think that I was the one who stole the blueprint, and not senior brother Yi? Hearing this, Zhang Laji shook his head. I'm not suspecting you. I just think that Yi Xian doesn't seem like the person who stole the blueprint. That's why I asked everyone to investigate. Just as Zhang Laji finished speaking, Tang Jinan had already stood up and said loudly, Third junior brother, just say it. Who are you suspecting? As long as you say his name, I will definitely not let him off. Don't worry, I will definitely stand on your side. After hearing Tang Jinan's words, Zhang Laji's heart skipped a beat. He looked at Tang Jinan doubtfully. He never expected that his second senior brother, who had always been on good terms with him, would actually say such a thing. On the surface, Tang Jinan's words seemed like he was supporting him. As long as he said who might have stolen his master's blueprint, Tang Jinan would definitely stand on his side and seek justice. However, if he thought about this carefully, it would be a little bad. If he really pointed out the person who stole the blueprint, then no matter who that person was, they would eventually stand on Bai Jianmu's side and become his enemy. When that happened, even though Tang Jinan's words sounded good, Zhang Laji was certain that he would definitely not do as he said. If there were no accidents, not only would Tang Jinan not help him, but he would also kick him while he was down. As he thought about this, Zhang Laji didn't know what was going on. The last time he pointed out that Yi Xian was the person who stole the blueprint, there hadn't been such a change. Zhang Laji remembered very clearly that during the last gathering, Tang Jinan had only greeted his master when he arrived. For the rest of the time, he had been listening by the side. He had not said a word, nor had he given any suggestions. Lu Huarong was even more absent-minded that day. Like Tang Jinan, after greeting his master, he lowered his head and sat in his chair without saying a word. He waited until the end of the gathering, but he didn't say a word. But today, it was as if the two of them had taken the wrong medicine. They were fighting to be the first to speak. Not only that, although they did not explicitly say that Yi Xian was the one who stole the blueprint, they had already expressed their intentions clearly in the open and in the dark. The blueprint was stolen by Yi Xian. Other than that, there was no other possibility. Zhang Laji really couldn't figure out what was going on. It had only been a few days, but the matters of his own sect had become so complicated. When he first heard Zhang Meng's words, Zhang Laji felt that since they were all fellow disciples of the same sect, it was their responsibility to find the person who stole the blueprint. As for other problems, Zhang Laji really didn't think about it. These few days, he had been staying in his courtyard and hadn't come out to contact anyone. By the time he came out, things had already changed. After he voiced his suspicions to his master, Zhang Laji could tell that his master was very happy. After all, Yi Xian was his master's favorite disciple. Yi Xian wasn't only skilled in the art of engineering, but he was also an upright person. It was precisely because of this that Sun Xinjing admired this disciple very much. Zhang Laji knew that when Sun Xinjing heard that Yi Xian had stolen the blueprint, he definitely didn't feel good. The person he trusted the most had betrayed him. This kind of feeling definitely didn't feel good. Zhang Laji guessed that this might be the reason why his master had locked Yi Xian in the Repentance Pavilion in a fit of anger. After the matter had passed and he had calmed down from his rage, his master must have realized that something was amiss. Logically speaking, among all the disciples, the one who was least likely to steal the blueprint should be Yi Xian. This was because Yi Xian didn't have to steal the blueprint. In any case, Sun Xinjing had already said that he would be the next branch master. He would be able to see the blueprint sooner or later, so why would he do something like this? Now, Yi Xian was locked in the Repentance Pavilion. If he wanted to come out, he would probably be expelled from the sect one day. Chapter 139. No matter what, Zhang Laji refused to believe that Yi Xian had stolen the blueprint because there was no need for him to steal the blueprint. If that was the case, the blueprint must have been stolen by another disciple. In that case, who was the one who stole the blueprint? Tang Jinan saw that Zhang Laji did not answer his question, but he did not mind and continued. Third junior brother, if you have anything to say, just say it. Even if you say that I was the one who stole the blueprint, I won't blame you. As long as we can find the real person who stole the blueprint, we will be able to live up to Master's teachings for so many years. At this point, Tang Jinan turned to look at Sun Xinjing, cupped his fists, and bowed. He said respectfully, Master, I don't have any other thoughts. I just want to find the person who stole the blueprint. Originally, everyone thought that it was Yi Xian who stole the blueprint, and there was conclusive evidence. However, third junior brother doesn't think that it was Yi Xian who stole the blueprint. Therefore, I implore Master to let third junior brother identify the person who stole the blueprint so that we can clean up the scum of the Tianji sect. After Tang Jinan finished speaking, before Sun Xinjing could answer, Bai Jianmu quickly stepped forward and said, Master, since third senior brother said that Yi Xian was not the one who stole the blueprint, then he must know who did. Therefore, third senior brother, please identify the person who stole the blueprint. Lu Huarong saw that everyone had spoken, so he quickly stepped forward and said, Master, when third senior brother identifies the person who stole the blueprint, please don't make a mistake. Otherwise, it will be unfair to everyone. Sun Xinjing nodded after listening to the words of his disciples. Then, he turned his gaze to Zhang Leji and asked, Do you really know who stole the blueprint? After hearing his master's question, Zhang Leji quickly shook his head and cupped his fists. I don't know. After Zhang Leji finished speaking, Sun Xinjing nodded again and turned his gaze to Bai Jianmu and the others. He asked, Do you know who stole the blueprint? Lu Huarong spoke first. Only senior marshal brother Yi knows where Master put the blueprint. The other senior marshal brothers know nothing about it. At this point, Lu Huarong paused for a moment before continuing. Disciple is slow-witted. I really can't think of any other possibilities other than senior brother Yi stealing the blueprint. After listening to Lu Huarong's words, Sun Xinjing nodded. He then turned to Tang Jinan and asked, What about you? What do you think? Who do you think stole the drawings? After Tang Jinan heard his master's question, he cupped his fist towards his master and replied, Master's knowledge and understanding of mechanisms is not something that disciples like me can imagine. The place where his master placed the blueprints was also very well guarded. It was impossible for outsiders to discover it. Therefore, according to this disciple's guess, other than Yi Xian who knows the location of the hidden blueprints, I really can't think of anyone else who knows the location of the hidden blueprints. After listening to Tang Jinan's words, Sun Xinjing nodded and asked, In that case, you think that Yi Xian must have stolen the blueprints? After listening to his master's words, Tang Jinan was first stunned. After a long while, he shook his head and said, Master, this disciple only said that only junior marshal brother Yi knows where Master put the blueprints. As for whether he stole the blueprints, this disciple doesn't dare to say. Speaking of this, Tang Jinan's tone paused for a moment before continuing. However, since the other disciples don't know where Master put the blueprints, now it seems that only Yi Xian has the highest possibility of stealing the blueprints. Hearing this, Sun Xinjing nodded. Logically speaking, Tang Jinan was right. Sun Xinjing was a mechanism master. The place where he put the blueprints must be filled with mechanisms. If one didn't know where the mechanisms were, it wouldn't be easy to steal the blueprints. Among the 8 disciples, only Yi Xian knew the location and mechanism of the blueprints. Under such circumstances, no one would believe that the blueprints weren't stolen by Yi Xian. As for the other disciples, no one knew the location of the blueprints, so naturally, they didn't have the chance to steal the blueprints. After listening to Tang Jinan's words, Sun Xinjing finally looked at Bai Jianmu and asked with a smile, What do you think? Who could have stolen the blueprints? After hearing his master's question, Bai Jianmu first cupped his fists towards his master and then said firmly, Yi Xian, it must have been Yi Xian who stole it. There's no doubt about that. Hearing Bai Jianmu's certainty, Sun Xinjing couldn't help but be stunned. Then, he asked with a smile, Why are you so sure that the blueprints were stolen by Yi Xian? After hearing his master's question, Bai Jianmu turned around and pointed at his fellow disciples behind him and said loudly, Master, we're all loyal to you. We've never thought of stealing the blueprints. Moreover, we don't know where the blueprints are. Even if we wanted to steal them, we wouldn't know where to start. Speaking of this, Bai Jianmu shouted to his fellow disciples behind him, Fellow disciples, fellow disciples. Speaking of this, Bai Jianmu turned his gaze to the youngest 8th junior sister, Li Shuiyin, and said with a smile, And our cute little junior sister. After hearing Bai Jianmu's praise, Li Shuiyin's face immediately turned red. She hurriedly lowered her head and didn't dare to look at the others. After Bai Jianmu called out to everyone, he continued, Tell me, did you guys steal the blueprints? Hearing this, the others didn't dare to answer in front of their master. They could only shake their heads to show that they didn't steal the blueprints. Seeing this, Bai Jianmu immediately turned around and said to Sun Xinjing, Master, you saw it too. They're all your disciples. Master, you should believe what they say, right? Hearing this, Sun Xinjing was also stunned. Then, he nodded and said loudly, Of course I trust everyone. This time, I called you all here to see if there are any other possibilities. I'm not suspicious of you. After hearing their master's words, the disciples hurriedly clasped their fists to express their gratitude for their master's trust. After the crowd quieted down, Bai Jianmu said again, Master, you saw it too. None of them know where the blueprints are, and they all said that they didn't steal them. Other than them, there's only Senior Brother Yi. Although the blueprints are hidden, Senior Brother Yi knows that if he wants to steal them, it's a piece of cake. Other than that, Master, think about it. Now, other than Yi Xian, all the disciples are standing in front of you. You can take a good look and see who would steal the blueprints. Speaking of this, Bai Jianmu's tone paused. Then, he continued in a more serious tone, Master, among these people, as long as you tell me who stole the blueprints, I'll definitely not let him off. Chapter 140. After listening to Bai Jianmu's words, Sun Xinjing didn't say anything. He just turned his head and looked at Zhang Leji. It was because Zhang Leji was the initiator of this matter. It was Zhang Leji who had doubts about the nature of this matter. So Sun Xinjing gathered all his disciples to discuss this matter together. Zhang Leji saw his master looking at him and felt a headache. At that time, he felt that Zhang Meng's words were very reasonable. So he hurriedly came to find his master and told him about this matter. However, he had no evidence or clues. He didn't have any of these, let alone know who stole the blueprint. If he didn't know who stole the blueprint, there was no need for everyone to gather to discuss this matter today. However, if this matter wasn't solved today, it would be more difficult to solve it in the future. The key was that now Zhang Leji didn't dare to look at his fellow disciples, because whoever he looked at meant that he suspected that person. If the person he looked at was really the person who stole the blueprint, then it was understandable. If it wasn't this person, then wouldn't he be wrongly accusing another person? Until now, Zhang Leji didn't even dare to say who he suspected because so many people were looking at him. Once he said who he suspected, the result wouldn't be what he wanted to see. Through the matter just now, Zhang Leji felt that there was something wrong with Lu Huarong, but could he say it out loud? It was impossible. Tang Jianan, Bai Jianmu, and Lu Huarong had obviously been connected. If Zhang Leji dared to say that Lu Huarong was the suspect, then Tang Jianan and Bai Jianmu would definitely target this matter and drag Zhang Leji down. Therefore, Zhang Leji didn't dare to say anything now. Even if he was anxious now, he didn't dare to say anything. Other than Lu Huarong, Zhang Leji really couldn't think of anyone else who would be the suspect. 7th junior brother Mei Guangji didn't say much since he came in. It seemed that he didn't join Bai Jianmu's group. However, could he say that he wasn't suspicious just based on this point? It was impossible. This matter might be taken advantage of by Bai Jianmu and the others. But who dared to doubt that this matter wasn't done by Bai Jianmu? Zhang Liji's mind raced. He was considering who was the suspect. Of course, even if he considered that he might be suspicious at any time, he couldn't say it out loud unless he had solid evidence to prove that the blueprint was stolen. Only then would he say it out loud. Bai Jianmu was the one who testified that Yi Xian had stolen the blueprints. From Zhang Liji's point of view, regardless of whether Yi Xian stole the blueprint or not, Bai Jianmu would still accuse Yi Xian of stealing the blueprint. Because, as long as Yi Xian was the one who stole the blueprint, Bai Jianmu would benefit the most. Only if the blueprint was stolen by Yi Xian could Bai Jianmu become the leader of the South County branch. Yi Xian was his biggest obstacle. Yi Xian was his biggest obstacle to becoming the leader. In the entire South County branch, other than Yi Xian, the second person was Bai Jianmu. It could be said that if Yi Xian did not exist, Bai Jianmu would naturally be the successor of the South County branch. Under such circumstances, with Bai Jianmu's character, there was no reason for him not to testify against Yi Xian. Of course, it was also very likely that he was the one who stole the blueprint. His goal was to use it to frame Yi Xian so that he could achieve the goal of expelling Yi Xian from the sect. Zhang Liji thought about these things in his heart, but he could not say it out loud because this matter was too big. If he dared to testify against Bai Jianmu, it would not be a small matter. Tang Jianan and Lu Huarong were both involved with Bai Jianmu. If Bai Jianmu really did it, and if the matter had been confirmed and there was irrefutable evidence to prove that Bai Jianmu did it, then Tang Jianan and Lu Huarong would definitely be implicated. Sun Xinjing had a total of 8 disciples. If 3 of his disciples were implicated because of this matter, it would definitely not be a small matter. Therefore, Zhang Laji had to be careful. If it was true, it would be fine, but if it was just a guess, then it would be difficult to handle. When Lu Huarong saw that Zhang Laji did not speak, the corners of his mouth suddenly curled up into a sneer. This sneer disappeared in the blink of an eye and was replaced by a faint smile. Lu Huarong walked to Zhang Liji's side and asked with a smile, "Third senior brother, who are you suspecting? You can tell us so that we can all hear who stole the blueprint." After hearing Lu Huarong's words, Zhang Laji turned to look at him and became even more suspicious. However, at this moment, he could only reply with a smile, "I'm just guessing that junior brother Yi is not the one who stole the blueprint. As for who stole it, I really can't think of anything." At this point, Zhang Liji paused and asked, "Could it be that junior brother Lu knows who stole the blueprint?" Lu Huarong was stunned when he heard this and subconsciously took a step back. Then, he replied with a smile, "Of course not. How would I know who stole the blueprint?" After saying this, Lu Huarong had completely calmed down, and only then did he continue speaking. "Third senior brother, this matter was clearly done by senior brother Yi. Among everyone here, you're the only one who suspects that senior brother Yi didn't do it. Then, third senior brother naturally knows who stole the blueprint." At this point, Lu Huarong looked at Zhang Liji and asked again, "Third senior brother, I'm right." After hearing Lu Huarong's words, Zhang Liji's view of Lu Huarong changed drastically. In the past, Lu Huarong was a man of few words and rarely spoke. Unless someone asked him, he would not say a word. Of course, this did not mean that he was arrogant and disdained to talk to others. It was because he was an introverted person and naturally did not like to talk. However, now, it was as if he had changed into a different person. He was boasting in front of Zhang Liji and was simply not like how he used to be. What was the reason for this? What was the reason for Lu Huarong to change so much? Zhang Liji did not know. He was now a little suspicious. He wondered if the Lu Huarong in front of him was the Lu Huarong of the past. Also, Lu Huarong had become so strange. He kept saying that the blueprint was stolen by Yi Xian. What was the reason? Could it be that the blueprint was actually stolen and he wanted to frame Yi Xian? Was that why he behaved like this and made a man of few words become so active? Other than this reason, Zhang Liji really could not think of any other reason for Lu Huarong to change so much. Thinking of Lu Huarong, Zhang Liji thought of Yi Xian again. Zhang Liji did not dare to confirm whether the blueprint was stolen by Yi Xian or not. He only suspected that Yi Xian did not steal the blueprint. However, he really did not know the real situation. As the saying goes, you may know a person for a long time without understanding their true nature. This saying was absolutely reasonable. Yi Xian might have taken advantage of the fact that no one would suspect him, so he stole the blueprint. This was because everyone knew that Yi Xian was the next successor. Chapter 141. Since no one would suspect Yi Xian, even if Yi Xian had stolen the blueprint, no one would know. However, he had forgotten that there was still Bai Jianmu, an opponent who was equally as competitive as him. Bai Jianmu definitely wouldn't let such a good opportunity go to waste. Perhaps this was also Yi Xian's mistake. Zhang Liji felt a headache coming on as he thought of this. He really couldn't remember what was going on. Tang Jianan, Bai Jianmu, Lu Huarong, and Yi Xian flashed through his mind like a revolving lantern. He kept suspecting them and denying them. Seeing Zhang Liji deep in thought with his head lowered, Tang Jianan stepped forward and patted him on the shoulder. He said with a smile, "Third junior brother, I know you don't want junior brother Yi to be wronged, but think about this carefully. Other than Yi Xian, it's basically impossible for anyone else to have done it. No one else knows where the blueprint is hidden, and only junior brother Yi knows. Think about it. Other than junior brother Yi, who else could have done it?" Tang Jianan paused and patted Zhang Liji again. He said earnestly, "Third junior brother, I know you're doing this for everyone's sake, but you have to distinguish between the truth and lies. Don't be deceived by others." Zhang Liji raised his head and looked at Tang Jianan when he heard that. He thought about what Tang Jianan had just said, but he replied, "Second senior brother, I'm just suspecting. Although junior brother Yi knows where Master hid the blueprint, does that prove that he stole it? I keep feeling that something is wrong." Tang Jianan shook his head. "What's wrong? None of us know where Master hid the blueprint. Besides, we're all people who study mechanisms. I think that if Master didn't tell us where he hid the blueprint, no one would be able to find it even if they wanted to." At this point, Tang Jianan turned his head to look at Zhang Liji and continued, "Third junior brother, don't you think so? If Master didn't tell us where the blueprints were, how would we know where it was? So, since none of us know where the blueprints are kept, Yi Xian, who knows where the blueprints are kept, is the biggest suspect." After hearing Tang Jianan's words, Zhang Liji nodded. "Second senior brother, you're right. Logically speaking, Yi Xian should be the most likely person to steal the blueprint, since he knows the location of the blueprint. But under these circumstances, why would Yi Xian steal the blueprint? Stealing it now will only bring him harm. Why would he want to steal it? I just can't figure it out, so I have my suspicions." Tang Jianan nodded when he heard that. "You're right. Logically speaking, it's impossible for junior brother Yi to steal the blueprint. However, he did. What can we do?" After hearing Tang Jianan's words, Zhang Liji hurriedly said, "Second senior brother, this is exactly what I suspect. Why would Yi Xian submit the blueprint? He has no reason to steal it." After saying that, Zhang Liji paused for a moment before he continued, "Second senior brother, I think that if Yi Xian directly asked Master to take a look at the blueprint, Master would probably agree." When Tang Jianan heard that, he was stunned at first, and his expression changed slightly. Then he smiled and said, "Third junior brother, this is just our imagination. In reality, Yi Xian did steal the blueprint. Even if we want to suspect him, we can't find anyone to suspect because no one knows where the blueprint is kept." At this point, Tang Jianan looked deeply at Zhang Liji and asked, "Third junior brother, could it be that you suspect someone? If you really do suspect someone, please tell us so that we can meet the person who stole Master's blueprint." After hearing Tang Jianan's words, Zhang Liji couldn't help but frown again. If he knew who stole the blueprint, he wouldn't be wasting his breath here. He would have found the person who stole the blueprint a long time ago. Seeing that Zhang Liji was silent, Tang Jianan smiled and patted him. "Third junior brother, are you worried about something? Don't be afraid. As long as you tell us with second senior brother here, it won't be a problem." When Zhang Liji heard this, he shook his head. "I don't know who stole it either. Not only do I not know, but I don't even know if it was Yi Xian who stole it." Tang Jianan was stunned when he heard that. He asked curiously, "Third junior brother, if you don't know anything, how can you say that Yi Xian didn't steal the blueprint?" Zhang Leji smiled bitterly and shook his head. "I don't know if Yi Xian stole the blueprint or not. I just feel that it's a little too easy to convict him just because he knows where the blueprint is kept. That's why I invited all of you here to discuss this matter and see if there are any new discoveries." After hearing what Zhang Leji said, Tang Jinan nodded and asked, "Third junior brother, are you just suspecting that you really don't know who stole the blueprint?" Zhang Leji smiled bitterly and shook his head. "I don't know. I just wanted everyone here today to discuss this matter and see if there are any new clues." This time, before Tang Jinan could answer, Lu Huarong, who had been listening to their conversation, suddenly said, "Third senior brother, just because of your suspicions, you're assuming that Yi Xian didn't steal the blueprint, but that one of us stole it. What you're doing doesn't seem fair to us." When Zhang Leji heard this, he smiled bitterly and shook his head. Regardless of whether Lu Huarong stole the blueprint or not, what he had done was indeed wrong. At this thought, Zhang Leji clasped his fists and said apologetically to his seniors and juniors, "I was really a little reckless today. I've caused a lot of trouble for all of you. I apologize to all of you." When everyone heard this, they hurriedly bowed back. After saying this, Zhang Leji clasped his fists again and said, "Seniors and juniors, please come together to discuss this matter and find out who did it so that we can catch the person who stole the blueprint." Although everyone heard Zhang Leji's question, no one answered him. This was because the only people left were first senior brother LV Wenkong, seventh junior brother Mei Guangji, and eighth junior sister Li Shuyan. To be honest, these three people were the least important among Sun Xinjing's 8 disciples. Although first senior brother LV Wenkong was the first senior brother, he was the one who had the least sense of presence. He didn't care about trivial matters and only knew how to study mechanisms every day. Therefore, although everyone respected him on the surface, LV Wenkong didn't have much of a deterrent force. Seventh junior brother Mei Guangji didn't have a strong sense of presence either. Usually, only Yi Xian treated him better. The rest of them ignored him. Eighth junior sister Li Shuyan's situation wasn't much better. She was young and hadn't been in the sect for long, so she naturally didn't have much say. Chapter 142. In this case, there were a total of 3 people in Bai Jianmu's camp. And on his side, it could be said that he was the only one. Even if 7th junior brother Mei Guangji and 8th junior sister Li Shuyan joined his camp, it would only be a confrontation. Thinking of this, Zhang Leji turned to look at his master, wanting to see what he meant. He saw that Sun Xinjing was sitting on the main seat, staring at the door of the main hall in a daze. Seeing this scene, Zhang Leji only muttered to himself for a moment before he understood his master's thoughts. These people were all Sun Xinjing's disciples. No matter who stole the blueprint, Sun Xinjing would not feel good about it. Sun Xinjing trusted and valued each of his disciples. If not for these reasons, he would not have accepted these people as his disciples. However, now that someone had betrayed him, one could imagine how Sun Xinjing felt. This feeling of betrayal was definitely not a good feeling. Seeing this, Zhang Leji could only sigh in his heart. It seemed that it was impossible to rely on his master's help. If he wanted to find the real person who stole the blueprint, he could only rely on himself. Thinking of this, Zhang Leji turned to look at Tang Jinan and asked, "Second senior brother, who do you think stole the blueprint?" After hearing Zhang Leji's question, Tang Jinan said without hesitation, "The only person who knows the location of the blueprint is Yi Xian. Other than him, I really can't think of anyone else." Speaking of this, Tang Jinan's tone paused. Then he asked, "Third junior brother, who do you think stole the blueprint?" Hearing this, Zhang Leji shook his head. "It's hard to say now. In short, I think it's a bit far-fetched to convict Yi Xian based on this point alone and say that he took the blueprint." Speaking of this, Zhang Leji suddenly took out a copper coin and waved it in front of Tang Jinan. He asked, "Second senior brother, do you see that I don't have a copper coin?" When Tang Jinan heard this, he looked at the copper coin in Zhang Leji's hand and nodded in confusion. "I saw it. What's wrong, third junior brother?" Is there a difference without the copper coin? After listening to Tang Jianan's words, Zhang Laji shook his head and put away the copper coin with a smile. Then he said, "Second senior brother, since you have seen my copper coin, then if I lose it in the future, can I say that you stole it?" Hearing this, Tang Jianan was a little annoyed. "Why? I only took a look at your copper coin. Why did you accuse me of stealing it when you lost it?" At this point, Tang Jianan's gaze suddenly froze, and he couldn't continue speaking. The reason for that was because he understood what Zhang Leji was trying to express. Zhang Leji let him take a look at the copper coin, and then told him that if the copper coin was lost, he would say that he stole it. Yi Xian knew where his master had hidden the blueprints. If the blueprints were missing, he would say that he had stolen them. Tang Jianan already understood what Zhang Leji was trying to say. That was what he meant. Seeing that Tang Jianan didn't finish his words, Zhang Leji knew that Tang Jianan had understood his meaning. He smiled and said, "Second senior brother, I don't have any copper coins. If I say that you stole them, what will you think?" After hearing Zhang Leji's question, Tang Jianan's face turned slightly red. He stuttered, not knowing how to answer. If he answered that the copper coin was lost, it had nothing to do with him. He only took a look at it. Then wouldn't that mean that Yi Xian only knew where the blueprints were hidden? Then what did it have to do with him? Zhang Leji looked at Tang Jianan with a smile. He knew that Tang Jianan couldn't answer this question, but Zhang Leji still wanted him to answer because it was very important. No matter how Tang Jianan answered, it would prove that Yi Xian only knew where the blueprints were hidden and didn't necessarily steal them. Facing Zhang Leji's question, Tang Jianan couldn't answer. He looked at Zhang Leji's gaze and felt a little anxious. His mind raced, trying to think of an answer. However, no matter how he thought, he felt that no matter how he answered, it didn't seem right. Seeing that Tang Jianan was so anxious that sweat appeared on his forehead, Zhang Leji didn't intend to let him go. He smiled and asked again, "Second senior brother, am I right? If I lost my copper coin, would you be the one who stole it?" Facing Zhang Leji's question, Tang Jianan was so anxious that his brows were tightly knitted together. His mind was spinning rapidly, but he still couldn't answer this question. At this moment, Bai Jianmu suddenly sneered, interrupting Tang Jianan's thoughts. He subconsciously raised his head and looked at Bai Jianmu. After Bai Jianmu sneered, he walked in front of Zhang Leji and said loudly, "Third senior brother, you're really making things difficult for me. How can the value of a copper coin be compared to the sex treasure?" Speaking up to this point, Bai Jianmu's gaze turned to Tang Jianan again. He smiled and said, "Second senior brother, you're thinking too much. How valuable can a copper coin be? Even if it was thrown on the ground, would you pick it up?" Seeing that Bai Jianmu had come over, Tang Jianan felt a little relieved. After hearing Bai Jianmu's question, he immediately understood. His heart was completely at ease, and his expression returned to normal. Tang Jianan smiled and replied, "Of course not. It's just a copper coin. How can its value be compared to the sex treasure?" Speaking up to this point, Tang Jianan turned to look at Zhang Leji. He took out a copper coin and held it in his hand. He smiled and said, "If third junior brother loses his copper coin, I'll compensate you." Hearing this, Zhang Leji was stunned. He didn't expect that these two people would actually solve this problem. Seeing that Tang Jianan had returned to normal, Zhang Leji could only smile bitterly and shake his head. "Second senior brother, I'm just using the copper coin as an example. What I want to say is that Yi Xian's matter is the same as this copper coin's matter. They can't be used as evidence." Speaking up to this point, Zhang Leji paused for a moment before continuing. "Second senior brother saw this copper coin of mine. If I lose it, it's obviously unreasonable for second senior brother to say that second senior brother stole it. In other words, if Yi Xian knows the location of the hidden blueprint, but the blueprint is lost, is it appropriate for us to accuse Yi Xian of stealing the blueprint? I feel that this is the same logic. Just based on knowing the location of a blueprint or seeing it, it's too unfair for Yi Xian to accuse Yi Xian of stealing the blueprint. Therefore, I want to gather everyone together to discuss this matter and see if we can find any new clues. If we really can't find any clues, then we can only say that Yi Xian stole the blueprint." Speaking up to this point, Zhang Leji sighed and continued, "We're all fellow disciples. If Yixian is really innocent, then we naturally can't sit back and do nothing." Chapter 143. After Zhang Leji finished speaking, Lu Huarong, who had been silent for a long time, suddenly spoke up. "Third senior brother, that may be the case, but the situation is different. Senior brother Bai has already said that the value of the copper coin and the blueprint are completely different. Naturally, everyone's reactions would be different." Speaking up to this point, Lu Huarong turned around and looked at 8th junior sister Li Shuyan. He smiled and asked, "8th teacher, tell me, is the value of Master's blueprint and a copper coin the same?" After hearing Lu Huarong's words, Li Shuyan subconsciously glanced at Zhang Leji. Then, she shook her head and replied softly, "It's not the same." After hearing Li Shuyan's reply, Lu Huarong shrugged at Zhang Leji and said with a smile, "Third senior brother, you see, even junior sister Li knows that the value of a copper coin and a blueprint are completely different. The two can't be compared at all. Therefore, third senior brother's analogy still can't prove that the blueprint wasn't stolen by Yixian." After Zhang Leji heard Lu Huarong's words, he couldn't help but take a deep look at Lu Huarong. How could he not understand what had caused the usually taciturn Lu Huarong to become so lively? Zhang Leji smiled. "Junior brother Lu, that was just my analogy. If the thing in my hand wasn't a copper coin, but something more valuable, then the two can be compared." Hearing this, Lu Huarong shook his head. "There's no way to compare. First of all, I don't think third senior brother would easily take out something that can only be compared to the blueprint. Secondly, third senior brother would definitely hide something very valuable in a very secretive place." Speaking up to this point, Lu Huarong paused for a moment before continuing. "Third senior brother, think about it. If you were to hide something valuable, wouldn't you hide it very secretively?" Hearing this, Zhang Leji nodded. "Of course, I would definitely hide it in a place where no one can find it." Lu Huarong nodded. "That's right. If I were to find out where third senior brother hid his treasure, and third senior brother lost his treasure, would you suspect me?" Speaking up to this point, Lu Huarong glanced at the rest of the people before continuing to ask, "Third senior brother, if you lose your treasure, will you suspect the person who knows the location of your treasure or the person who doesn't?" Hearing this, Zhang Leji was momentarily stunned. Lu Huarong's words definitely made sense. If what he said was true, and he had a precious treasure, he would definitely hide it in a place where others couldn't find it. Coincidentally, there was someone who knew where he hid the treasure. Then, if the treasure was really lost, who would he suspect? The first person to suspect was definitely the person who knew the location of the treasure. Other people didn't know where the treasure was hidden. Even if they wanted to steal it, they wouldn't know where to start. Zhang Leji, Lu Huarong, and Lu Huarong, his impression of Lu Huarong deepened. Zhang Leji believed that with Lu Huarong's temper, he wouldn't be able to think of so many possibilities. This must be something that he had thought of in the past, but was only bringing it up now. Thinking up to this point, Zhang Leji subconsciously glanced at Bai Jianmu. He was a little suspicious. Did Bai Jianmu teach Lu Huarong to say all this? Seeing Zhang Leji looking at him, Bai Jianmu sneered and asked, "Third senior brother, don't tell me you think junior brother Lu is wrong? Or, if you lose your treasure, not only will you not suspect the person who knows the location, you will instead suspect the person who doesn't know the location." Hearing this, Zhang Leji was once again stunned. After a while, he shook his head with a bitter smile and replied, "Of course, the first person to suspect is the person who knows the location of the treasure." After hearing Zhang Leji's words, Tang Jianan smiled and nodded. "Isn't that the case? The logic is the same. What happened to us now is the same logic as that. First of all, the blueprint is lost, and the only person who knows the location of the blueprint is Yixian. Then, shouldn't we suspect Yixian first?" After Zhang Leji heard Tang Jinan's question, although he did not want to answer, with so many people watching, he still nodded. "That's true." Hearing this, Tang Jinan stepped forward and patted Zhang Leji on the shoulder. He said with a smile, That's right. Master's blueprint is lost. If he doesn't suspect Yi Xian, who knows the location of the treasure, how can he suspect us, who don't know the location of the treasure? Zhang Liji nodded. What Tang Jinan said was absolutely right. No matter where he said it, no one would say that Tang Jinan's words were wrong. Logically speaking, the biggest suspect of the loss of the blueprint of the South County branch was definitely Yi Xian. This was because in the entire South County branch, only his master and Yi Xian knew the location of the treasure. It was impossible for his master to steal his blueprint. Then, the person who stole the blueprint could only be Yi Xian because only he knew the location of the blueprint. This logic was correct no matter where it was. However, why did Zhang Liji feel that something was wrong? If there were no accidents, Yi Xian would be the next Helm Master's successor. As the next Helm Master, it would be a piece of cake for him to look at the blueprint. Then, what reason did Yi Xian have to steal the blueprint? In this way, Yi Xian had no reason to steal the blueprint. However, only Yi Xian knew where the blueprint was hidden. Even Zhang Liji was a little puzzled by this logic of flipping back and forth. Yi Xian had no reason to steal the blueprint, but only Yi Xian knew where the blueprint was hidden. In this way, Yi Xian was the most likely to steal the blueprint. Perhaps Yi Xian was impatient and wanted to see the blueprint first before he could inherit the position of leader. Perhaps he thought that even if he took the blueprint, his master would not do anything to him. So he took the blueprint. Looking at it this way, it was quite reasonable. But was this really the case? Zhang Liji felt that something was wrong because he knew that Yi Xian was not that kind of person. Yi Xian had always been calm and steady. He did not seem like the kind of person who could not keep his cool. Yi Xian had always respected his master. He did not seem like the kind of person who would steal his master's blueprint without his master's permission. However, all the evidence pointed to Yi Xian. It proved that Yi Xian was the one who took the blueprint. Seeing that Zhang Liji did not answer his question, Tang Jinan patted him on the shoulder again and said with a smile, "Third Junior, I know that you have a good relationship with Yi Xian. However, even if you have a good relationship, you can't create something out of nothing and sow discord between brothers." After Zhang Liji heard Tang Jinan's words, he was stunned. He didn't expect that Tang Jinan would say that he was trying to sow discord between the two brothers. He really didn't expect this. Chapter 144. Looking at Tang Jinan's smiling face, Zhang Liji suddenly felt a little disgusted. Zhang Liji hated this kind of person the most. He was clearly trying to harm Zhang Liji, but he still acted as if he was thinking for him. However, even though he knew that Tang Jinan was this kind of person, Zhang Liji couldn't do anything about it. The most important thing now was that he really didn't know who had stolen the blueprint. He didn't have any evidence or clues. Everything was based on guesses. It was also because of this that Zhang Liji didn't have enough confidence. He couldn't find a person who stole the blueprint. Just like what Tang Jinan said earlier, if he randomly pointed out the person who stole the blueprint, then Zhang Liji was sure that his outcome wouldn't be better than Yi Xian's. No, he definitely wouldn't be better than Yi Xian's. At least Yi Xian had him to speak up for him. If he was unlucky, who would speak up for him? Looking at these seniors and juniors in front of him, Zhang Liji was sure that if he was unlucky, Tang Jinan, Bai Jianmu, and Lu Huarong would definitely clap their hands and cheer. The others could only remain silent because they didn't have the ability to speak. Even if they did, it would be useless. Zhang Liji looked at these seniors and juniors in front of him, and his heart sank. He originally thought that he had found a way to convince everyone. After everyone knew that Yi Xian was framed, they would be filled with righteous indignation and look for the real person who stole the blueprint. He didn't expect the outcome to be like this. When he pointed out that Yi Xian wasn't the one who stole the blueprint, he felt like he was Yi Xian's accomplice and was suppressed by everyone. What was going on? Zhang Liji even suspected that they didn't want to find the real person who stole the blueprint. They just wanted Yi Xian to be the one who stole the blueprint. Thinking of this, Zhang Liji's heart felt even more bitter. They had been seniors and juniors for so many years, but he didn't expect things to turn out like this. Looking at the expressions of Tang Jinan and the others in front of him, although their faces were full of concern and worry, Zhang Laji no longer trusted them. Zhang Leji felt that they were already on the same side. They only cared about their own interests and didn't want to seek justice for Yixian. Then what should he do? Right now, he could only seek redress for Yixian. Would that be of any use? He was alone and did not seem to be able to make much of a difference. At this moment, Zhang Laji felt like giving up. He had a premonition that if this continued, his outcome would not be any better than Yixian's. Yixian's outcome was very likely to be expulsion from the sect. As for himself, it was very likely that he would become the enemy of his fellow sect members because he had once suspected them. No one was willing to be friends with someone who doubted them. Zhang Leji knew this. Although he didn't say who was the one who stole the blueprint, he had doubts. Of course, he doubted these fellow apprentices. These fellow apprentices naturally didn't want someone to suspect them. When Zhang Leji heard Zhang Meng's words, he was overjoyed. He thought that he had found the truth, and when his fellow disciples heard it, they would support him. Sigh. Zhang Leji sighed. That didn't happen. Now, he had become everyone's enemy. Seeing this, Zhang Leji knew that he couldn't back down anymore. There was no way out. If he couldn't find the real person who stole the blueprint, then not only would he not speak up for Yixian, but he himself would also be implicated. Tang Jinan, who was standing at the side, saw that Zhang Leji had been silent for a long time and was getting impatient. He asked, "Third junior brother, tell me quickly, who are you suspecting? I'll go and find him." Zhang Leji shook his head. "I've already said that I don't know who the real thief is. I've called everyone here to discuss and find out who the thief is." Bai Jimu heard Zhang Leji's words and sneered. "Since you said that Yixian isn't the one who stole the blueprint, then tell us who the real person is. Otherwise, we will suspect that you have ulterior motives." Zhang Leji was stunned when he heard this. He looked at Bai Jimu in surprise and asked doubtfully, "Junior brother Bai, ulterior motives? What do you mean? What ulterior motives can I have? Tell us." Bai Jimu heard Zhang Leji's words and sneered again. "Third senior brother, do you really want to say it?" Zhang Leji nodded. "Junior brother Bai, tell us. What ulterior motives do I have?" Bai Jimu laughed out loud. He cupped his hands at his master, Sun Xinjing, and said seriously, "Master, this disciple suspects that third senior brother wants to use this opportunity to suppress all of us." After Bai Jimu finished speaking, everyone was stunned. After a long while, they looked at Zhang Leji with puzzled gazes. Sun Xinjing, who was sitting in the main seat, also looked at Zhang Leji doubtfully. What Bai Jimu said just now was reasonable. Yixian was locked up in the Repentance Pavilion. Even if he was released, it wouldn't be easy for him to inherit the position of the branch leader. Since Yixian couldn't be the next branch leader, the position of the branch leader would naturally be vacant. That was exactly what Bai Jimu meant. Zhang Leji wanted to use this opportunity to frame the other senior brothers as the ones who stole the blueprint. Then, he would have no competition after he framed his strong competitors. In that case, Zhang Leji was the only candidate for the position of the next branch leader. In terms of seniority, eldest senior brother LV Wonkong had the most seniority because he was the eldest senior brother and had entered the sect the earliest. Logically speaking, after Sun Xinjing resigned from the position of branch leader, he would naturally be the next branch leader. However, eldest senior brother LV Wonkong was obsessed with mechanism techniques and didn't have any thoughts about the position of branch leader. Sun Xinjing also knew about his thoughts. Therefore, it was impossible for LV Wonkong to inherit the position of the next branch leader. Since eldest senior brother LV Wonkong, who had the most seniority, couldn't inherit the position of branch leader, then, according to seniority, the second person would naturally be second senior brother Tang Jinan. In the entire South County branch, other than eldest senior brother LV Wonkong, who had the most seniority, the second senior brother Tang Jinan was naturally second senior brother Tang Jinan. According to seniority, if eldest senior brother LV Wonkong didn't inherit the position of branch leader, then the position of branch leader would naturally belong to second senior brother Tang Jinan. However, although Tang Jinan's talent in mechanism techniques was not bad, compared to the other senior brothers, he was still far inferior. It could be said that Tang Jinan's mechanism techniques were ranked too low in the entire South County branch. First of all, Tang Jinan's mechanism techniques were not as good as Yi Xian's. Everyone admitted this because not only was Tang Jinan's mechanism techniques inferior to Yi Xian's, except for Bai Jianmu. Chapter 145. In the entire South County branch, the only person who could catch up to Yi Xian in terms of mechanism skills was Bai Jianmu. Tang Jinan's mechanism skills could not be compared to Yi Xian or Bai Jianmu's. Not only that, Tang Jinan's mechanism skills were not even as good as third senior brother Zhang Leji's. Zhang Leji's mechanism skills could be considered the third best among this generation of disciples in the South County branch. Tang Jinan's mechanism skills were so low, so it was naturally impossible for him to inherit the position of the branch leader, unless, according to seniority, he could inherit the position of the branch leader. Next, it was naturally third senior brother Zhang Leji. It could be said that he was very qualified to become the branch leader. In terms of seniority, Zhang Leji was the third senior brother. In terms of mechanism skills, other than Yi Xian and Bai Jianmu, he could be considered the number one person in the South County branch. Now, Yi Xian was locked up in the Repent Pavilion. Once he was expelled from the sect, Yi Xian would no longer be able to compete. Without Yi Xian competing for the position of the branch leader, Zhang Leji would very likely be the next branch leader. Then, Zhang Leji only had one competitor left, and that was Bai Jianmu. This was because if Sun Xinjing was ranked according to seniority, Zhang Leji was the third senior brother, so his ranking was naturally higher than Bai Jianmu's. According to seniority, he could be the next branch leader. However, Bai Jianmu's mechanism skills were higher than his. According to skill, Bai Jianmu could be the next branch leader. Therefore, apart from Yi Xian, the two of them were the strongest and most powerful competitors. Apart from the two of them, the others were not competitive at all. Although Lu Huarong was so active, he still did not have any competitiveness. No matter who inherited the position of branch leader, it would definitely not be Lu Huarong. Now, the situation of the South County branch was like this. Sun Xinjing wanted to resign from the position of branch leader and was prepared to look for his master to study mechanism skills. Naturally, everyone coveted the position of the next branch master. Before Yi Xian stole the blueprint, no one had any thoughts about it. This was because everyone knew that Yi Xian would be the next branch master's successor. There was no doubt about that. However, Yi Xian just had to steal the blueprint, which brought him a lot of trouble. It was almost impossible for him to become the branch leader's successor again. In that case, the successor of the branch master would definitely be chosen from among them. Among all the disciples, everyone knew that the most competitive ones were the third senior brother Zhang Leji and the fifth senior brother Bai Jianmu. Other than the two of them, the others were basically uncompetitive. Sun Xinjing was naturally very clear about these problems. Among his disciples, there were some with high and some with low strength. As the branch leader, he naturally understood this very well. Originally, he had wanted to resign from his position as branch master. He had already thought of the next successor, and that was Yi Xian. Sun Xinjing believed that Yi Xian was the most suitable successor. However, Yi Xian stole the blueprint. Under such circumstances, it was already impossible for Yi Xian to become the branch master. Thus, it was imperative to choose a new successor. During this period, Sun Xinjing was also scratching his head. Who should he choose to become the next branch master successor? Eldest senior brother LV Wonkong was naturally out of the question. Sun Xinjing knew his character, so he naturally wouldn't choose him. Second senior brother Tang Jinan's skills weren't high, so he naturally wasn't the best successor. Third senior brother Zhang Leji's skills weren't bad, and he was ranked among the top among the disciples. Fifth senior brother Bai Jianmu's skills were second only to Yi Xian's. He was also considered one of the candidates for the branch master's successor. Sixth senior brother Lu Huarong was a man of few words. There was nothing much to say about him, so it was impossible for him to become the branch master. Seventh senior brother Mei Guangji wasn't old, so it was impossible for him to become the branch master. Eighth junior sister Li Shuiyin didn't even need to be mentioned. Sun Xinjing didn't even think about letting her become the branch master. Thus, after thinking about it, the best candidates for the branch master's position were only third senior brother Zhang Laji and fifth senior brother Bai Jianmu. Sun Xinjing thought so, and he was also troubled by this point. Both of them had their own advantages, so it wasn't easy to choose either of them. However, no matter who Sun Xinjing chose, he didn't want any disputes between fellow disciples. Now, after Sun Xinjing heard Bai Jianmu's words, he was also shocked. He couldn't help but turn to look at Zhang Leji, feeling a little doubtful. Could it be that this was his third disciple's motive? If Zhang Leji defeated Bai Jianmu, then the next branch master's successor could only be him. Thinking of this, Sun Xinjing felt even more doubtful. When Zhang Leji looked for him and told him what he had said, Sun Xinjing thought that Zhang Leji really wanted to redress Yi Xian's grievances. Now, it seemed that this wasn't necessarily the case. Sun Xinjing was suspicious. He turned to look at Zhang Leji and asked in a deep voice, "What do you mean?" Although Sun Xinjing didn't say much, Zhang Leji already knew that his master was suspecting him. Needless to say, even Zhang Leji himself was starting to doubt himself at this moment. He hadn't thought so much before, but now it seemed that if Bai Jianmu wasn't around, he might really become the next branch master. If Bai Jianmu and Yi Xian weren't around, Zhang Leji might really be the next branch master successor. As for Tang Jinan and Lu Huarong, who were very active in front of him, they weren't competitive at all. Even if Bai Jianmu wasn't around, they wouldn't have the slightest chance. Unless Bai Jianmu was gone, and even he was gone, the two of them would have a slight chance of becoming the next branch master successor. Thinking of this, Zhang Leji secretly glanced at Tang Jinan and saw that he was staring at him without any expression on his face. Seeing this scene, Zhang Leji was shocked. He felt that his guess was a little reliable. Could it be that Tang Jinan really had such intentions? Did he want to get rid of Bai Jianmu and then become the branch master? Thinking of this, Zhang Leji thought about it carefully and was shocked to discover that there was really such a possibility. If Tang Jinan was trying to sow discord between him and Bai Jianmu, then if he succeeded in sowing discord between him and Bai Jianmu, in the end, both of them would suffer and leave the South County branch. Thinking of this, Zhang Leji was even more certain. As long as he and Bai Jianmu left the South County branch, then among the remaining seniors and juniors in the South County branch, Tang Jinan might really become the branch master. Thinking of this, Zhang Leji sighed in his heart. He didn't know if he was thinking too much or if Tang Jinan really wanted to do this. In short, these were not what Zhang Leji wanted. He had gathered everyone today to discuss and see if there were any other possibilities regarding Yi Xian's matter. He didn't want to target anyone. Chapter 146. Zhang Leji only wanted to call everyone over to discuss the matter of Yi Xian and see if there was any injustice. However, he didn't expect things to turn out this way. Looking at Tang Jinan's flickering eyes, Bai Jianmu's overbearing manner, and Lu Huarong's eloquence, Zhang Leji felt a little speechless. At this moment, everyone was looking at Zhang Leji with some surprise. Bai Jianmu's words earlier made everyone have a feeling of sudden realization. Originally, everyone was still wondering why third senior brother Zhang Leji wanted to bring up the matter again when it was already confirmed that Yi Xian was the culprit. Originally, everyone didn't think much of it, or rather, they didn't dare to think about it. However, after Bai Jianmu said it, everyone's thoughts suddenly came alive. After a while, almost everyone believed Bai Jianmu's words. Third senior brother Zhang Leji must be like what Bai Jianmu said. He wanted to sow discord between everyone so that he could benefit from it. Looking at everyone's doubtful eyes and hearing his master's question, Zhang Leji suddenly sighed. He cupped his hands at Sun Xinjing and said, "Master, this disciple's feelings can be seen by heaven and earth. There is no selfishness in it. What I did today was only to find out the real person who stole the blueprint. I didn't mean to sow discord between us. This time, Before Sun Xinjing could answer, Lu Huarong spoke first. Third senior brother, you said that you didn't mean to sow discord between us, but this is what you did. You always want to talk about the blueprint, but you don't know that Yi Xian is the only one who knows where Master hid the blueprint. Other than him, no one else knows. At this point, Lu Huarong looked around and asked loudly, if we don't even know where the blueprint was hidden, how could we have stolen it? Besides Yi Xian, is there any other possibility? Everyone nodded when they heard that, but no one said anything because they didn't want to offend their third senior brother Zhang Leji. The current situation was too complicated. Who knew which side would win in the end? If third senior brother Zhang Leji won, he would be the leader of the South County branch in the future. If they offended him, they would not be able to stay in the South County branch in the future. However, Lu Huarong was already very satisfied with everyone's performance because he also knew that it was impossible for everyone to say it out loud. At this moment, everyone nodded, which was enough to explain everything. Lu Huarong turned to look at Zhang Leji and said with a smile, third senior brother, look, I'm right? Everyone thinks that it was Yi Xian who did it. Could it be that all of us are inferior to you? Or could it be that you're the only smart person in the entire South County branch and we're all stupid? When Zhang Leji heard Lu Huarong's words, he was infuriated. Lu Huarong's words were already very rude. Even if they were two enemies, they were nothing more than this. In the past, when Lu Huarong saw him, he was always respectful and did not even dare to say a word. However, now, his words were so rude that he almost treated him as an enemy. Zhang Leji did not understand what could make Lu Huarong, who had always been taciturn, become so sharp-tongued. Not only that, Lu Huarong no longer put his third senior brother in his eyes. Who gave him the guts to do that? Thinking of this, Zhang Leji snorted coldly. He turned to look at Lu Huarong and said angrily, Junior brother Lu, is this how you talk to your senior brother? After Lu Huarong heard Zhang Leji's accusation, his expression suddenly froze, and he subconsciously took 2 steps back. Although his courage had grown, his temper over the years still made him a little timid at this time. Seeing Lu Huarong like this, Zhang Leji took a step forward and asked, Junior brother Lu, who gave you the courage to talk to your senior brother like this? When Lu Huarong heard Zhang Leji's question, he subconsciously took another step back. At this moment, Bai Jianmu, who had been watching from the side, suddenly clapped his hands and said with a sneer, I'm right, aren't I? Some people just want to use this opportunity to suppress their fellow disciples to win the greatest benefits for themselves. When Zhang Leji heard this, he was shocked. He turned to look at Bai Jianmu and said angrily, Junior brother Bai, is this how you talk to your senior brother? Lu Huarong was afraid of Zhang Leji, but Bai Jianmu was not. Not only was he talented in the mechanism technique, but his family background was also very powerful. It could be said that in the entire South County branch, Bai Jianmu did not put anyone in his eyes. Of course, other than Sun Xinjing. Facing Zhang Leji's accusation, Bai Jianmu did not care at all. He just sneered and turned his head away from Zhang Leji. He said coldly, Third senior brother, don't tell me that you won't allow others to say some opinions? Junior brother Lu only expressed his own opinion. Although his words were a little extreme, this also shows his straightforwardness. We all know that junior brother Lu is a person who doesn't like to talk much. Today, he expressed his opinion a little too strongly. As his senior brothers, shouldn't we forgive him? However, third senior brother, not only do you not forgive junior brother Lu, but you also want to threaten him in the name of a senior brother. I want to ask. At this point, Bai Jianmu finally turned his head to look at Zhang Leji and asked loudly, Third senior brother, what do you mean? Don't tell me you won't even let junior brother Lu go? After hearing Bai Jianmu's words, Zhang Leji was stunned. Then, he looked at Bai Jianmu and said angrily, I have no enmity with junior brother Lu. Why would I threaten him? Bai Jianmu sneered and shook his head. Third senior brother, you don't have to quibble. Everyone saw it. Didn't you gather everyone here today for this purpose? You want to take the opportunity to push all of us away to achieve your own goal. At this point, Bai Jianmu sighed. Third senior brother, I didn't want to say these things. However, if I don't say it, I think you'll make a move on junior brother Liu. I have to say it." At this point, Bai Jianmu cupped his fists towards Sun Xinjing and said apologetically, "Master, please forgive this disciple for his rudeness. However, there are some words that this disciple has to say. This disciple cannot stand and watch his fellow disciples being threatened by others and not speak up. I hope Master can understand." Sun Xinjing nodded when he heard that. He turned to look at Zhang Leji with an unpleasant expression. "Everyone is here today to discuss something. You have to watch your words." Zhang Leji was shocked when he heard that. He looked at Sun Xinjing's expression and knew that things were not going well. If this continued, not only would he not be able to redress Yi Xian's grievances, but he would also be implicated. Chapter 147. Seeing his master's expression, Zhang Leji had a bad feeling. He did not expect Bai Jianmu and the others to be so cunning. Although he knew that what they said was wrong, Zhang Leji could not think of anything to refute them. What should he do next? Zhang Leji was a little hesitant. If he ignored Lu Huarong, Zhang Leji was sure that Lu Huarong would continue to say those words. At that time, he would lose all his face as a senior brother. However, if he reprimanded him again, it would definitely cause his master to be dissatisfied. At that time, his situation would be even worse. Thinking of this, Zhang Leji looked at everyone and did not know what to say. Seeing that Zhang Leji did not speak, Tang Jianan patted his shoulder and said with a smile, "Third junior brother, why are you doing this? We're all fellow disciples, and our relationship is usually very good. There are some things that you have to think clearly before you speak. This way, it's good for all of us." Zhang Leji was stunned when he heard this. He turned to look at Tang Jianan and saw that Tang Jianan was looking at him with a smile. Zhang Leji knew that Tang Jianan's words meant that he should not meddle in other people's business. It was better to protect himself. However, things had already come to this point. Could he still protect himself? According to the current situation, Zhang Leji was certain of the following situation. Yi Xian would definitely be expelled from the sect after a period of time. At that time, Bai Jianmu would become the leader of the South County branch. This was almost certain. In fact, Zhang Leji did not think that it was important who would become the leader of the South County branch. What was important was that he had already offended Tang Jianan, Bai Jianmu, and Lu Huarong. Although they did not do anything now, after Bai Jianmu became the leader, Zhang Leji was sure that the three of them would definitely take revenge on him. At that time, he would probably not be able to follow in Yi Xian's footsteps and be expelled from the sect. This kind of thing was definitely not something that Zhang Leji could just imagine. It was something that would definitely happen. If his master, Sun Xinjing, resigned from the position of division leader and Bai Jianmu successfully became the division leader, then the entire South County branch would belong to Bai Jianmu's group. It would be impossible for Zhang Leji to stay in the South County branch. If only one or two people wanted to harm Zhang Leji, it wouldn't be a big deal. However, if everyone wanted to scheme against Zhang Leji, then no matter how capable Zhang Leji was, he wouldn't be able to escape from their schemes. At this moment, Zhang Leji understood that he had no way out now. If he wanted to retreat, he could only retreat to Bai Jianmu's side and join their group. If Zhang Leji chose this path, then he would naturally not be able to mention Yi Xian's matter anymore. He could only watch as Yi Xian was expelled from his sect. Zhang Leji was a little hesitant. Did he really want this kind of outcome? Seeing Zhang Leji lowering his head and not saying anything, Lu Huarong suddenly took a step forward and said loudly, "Third senior brother, could it be that you still think that Yi Xian didn't steal the blueprint, but that we stole it?" Hearing this, Zhang Leji raised his head and looked at Lu Huarong in front of him. He felt uncomfortable, but he couldn't flare up. His master had already reminded him. If he reprimanded Lu Huarong, his master would definitely be displeased. Thinking of this, Zhang Leji took a deep breath and slowly exhaled. He calmed down a little and said, "I don't suspect anyone. I'm not suspecting anyone. As I said just now, I just feel that it's unfair to convict Yi Xian just because he knows the location of the treasure. That's why I asked everyone here to discuss this matter together." After hearing Zhang Leji's words, Lu Huarong only hesitated for a moment before saying, "Third senior brother, I understand what you mean. You're certain that Yi Xian didn't steal the blueprint, right?" Hearing this, Zhang Liji was stunned. For a moment, he didn't know what to say. Although the possibility of Yi Xian stealing the blueprint wasn't high, who could guarantee that he didn't steal it? Zhang Liji didn't have any evidence to prove that Yi Xian didn't steal the blueprint or that he already knew who stole it. Only then could he reveal the truth. However, Zhang Liji didn't know any of this. He just felt that it was unfair to convict Yi Xian of stealing the blueprint just because Yi Xian knew the location of the blueprint. So, as fellow disciples, Zhang Liji decided to give Yi Xian a chance to find out the truth for him. If Yi Xian was really the culprit, Zhang Liji wouldn't let him off the hook. On the contrary, if Yi Xian didn't steal the blueprint, Zhang Liji felt that he could at least live up to his conscience and be on good terms with everyone. Overall, Zhang Liji didn't have any evidence, and he didn't know who stole the blueprint. He wasn't even sure if Yi Xian was the culprit. Under these circumstances, how was Zhang Liji supposed to answer Lu Huarong's question? Seeing that Zhang Liji didn't answer his question, Lu Huarong didn't mind and continued to ask, "Third senior, since you can't be sure that Yi Xian didn't steal the blueprint, why are you speaking up for him?" After Lu Huarong said this, everyone turned to look at Zhang Liji, waiting to hear what he had to say. After hearing Lu Huarong's words, Zhang Liji's heart was filled with anger again. He wanted to rush forward and slap Lu Huarong across the face. Lu Huarong spoke for a long time. What he wanted to express was that he wanted everyone to know that he, Zhang Liji, was doing this because he had a good relationship with Yi Xian. So, he spoke up for Yi Xian. As for whether Yi Xian stole the blueprint, it didn't matter. Seeing the gazes of his fellow disciples, Zhang Liji was so angry that his hands were trembling. However, he could only endure it. Under such circumstances, if he dared to deal with Lu Huarong, he was sure that his master would be dissatisfied. This meeting, which was supposed to discuss Yi Xian, would end immediately. Zhang Liji was well aware of the consequences of this meeting. Just as he had guessed, he would no longer have the chance to clarify this matter. In the end, Yi Xian would be expelled from the sect and Bai Jianmu would naturally become the branch leader. Next, as long as Bai Jianmu became the branch leader, he wouldn't be leaving the South County branch for long. Therefore, even if Zhang Liji was extremely angry, he couldn't get angry because the consequences of getting angry were not what Zhang Liji wanted. Doing that would only satisfy Bai Jianmu. Thinking of this, Zhang Liji suppressed the anger in his heart and looked at Lu Huarong. A smile suddenly appeared on his face. "Junior brother Lu, I've already said that I didn't mean that." Chapter 148. After Lu Huarong heard Zhang Liji's words, he was stunned. He did not expect Zhang Liji to be so calm. The reason why Lu Huarong said this was, of course, to anger Zhang Liji. As long as Zhang Liji was angry, everything would be fine. Whether Zhang Liji spoke arrogantly, reprimanded him, or even injured him, it did not matter. As long as Zhang Liji was angry, his mission would be completed. Lu Huarong naturally knew the consequences of Zhang Liji's anger, because he was one of the schemers. As for the problem that Zhang Liji mentioned, whether Yi Xian was the one who stole the blueprint or not, in Lu Huarong's opinion, it was no longer important. This was because Yi Xian was already locked up in the Repent Pavilion. He believed that it would not be long before he was expelled from the sect. If he wanted to speak up for Yi Xian, he had already planned it out. No matter how he thought about it, only Zhang Liji could speak up for Yi Xian. This was because in the South County branch, other than Zhang Liji, no one else would listen even if they spoke up. Even if eldest senior brother LV Wonkong spoke up, Lu Huarong felt that it would not change anything. This was because eldest senior brother LV Wonkong usually did not speak, so he naturally did not have much prestige. It was impossible to rely on him to salvage the situation. Therefore, even though LV Wonkong was the eldest senior brother, Lu Huarong really did not think much of him. As for the remaining people, other than little junior brother and little junior sister, they were useless. Even if they wanted to speak, they probably would not have the chance. In this situation, only third senior brother Zhang Liji could be considered a little threat. However, in Lu Huarong's opinion, it was only a little threat and would not be of much use. Now, as long as Zhang Liji was angry, all of this would be perfectly resolved. Lu Huarong could already see the expression on his master, Sun Xinjing's face clearly. Everything was going according to their plan. There was no mistake at all. The key now was to make Zhang Liji angry. No matter what method it was, he had to make him angry. As long as Zhang Liji was angry, everything would be resolved. Originally, Lu Huarong thought that his words would definitely infuriate Zhang Liji and cause him to explode. Then, his plan would have succeeded. Unfortunately, Lu Huarong didn't expect that Zhang Liji would actually hold back and not get angry. This was a little bad. When Lu Huarong saw the smile on Zhang Liji's face, he actually felt a little flustered. He thought for a moment and said again, "Third senior brother, I know you have a good relationship with senior brother Yi, but it's slightly wrong of you to protect senior brother Yi. We're all fellow disciples, so why should we differentiate who's closer and who's closer? We already know that Yi Xian is the only one who knows where the blueprint was hidden. Tell me, if it wasn't Yi Xian who stole it, then who could it be?" When Zhang Liji heard this, he sneered and said, "How would I know who stole it? You, on the other hand." At this point, Zhang Liji looked at Lu Huarong and asked curiously, "Junior brother Lu, on the other hand, why do you keep saying that the blueprint was definitely stolen by Yi Xian? Do you have any evidence? Or rather, did you see Yi Xian steal the blueprint?" Lu Huarong was stunned when he heard this. Then he said, "Why would I see senior brother Yi steal the blueprint?" After hearing Lu Huarong's words, Zhang Liji looked into his eyes and asked again, "Since he didn't see it, how can you be sure that Yi Xian stole the blueprint?" Lu Huarong saw Zhang Liji's burning gaze and felt a little flustered, but he still answered, "Only Yi Xian knows where the blueprint was hidden. No one else knows where it was hidden. Isn't this enough to prove that he stole it?" When Zhang Liji heard this, he shook his head and said, "If you only rely on this, it definitely won't work." At this point, Zhang Liji took out the copper coin and waved it in front of Lu Huarong. He smiled and said, "You saw that I don't have a copper coin. If I lose my copper coin, I'll settle the score with you. Do you think that's fair?" Zhang Liji had already taken out this copper coin once, but when he took it out now, Lu Huarong was still stunned. He remembered Bai Jianmu's answer, and his heart immediately calmed down. "Third senior brother, your analogy is not appropriate. It's just a copper coin. Even if third senior brother wants it, as your junior brother, I can't refuse to give it to you. Third senior brother, am I right?" When Zhang Liji heard this, he shook his head and said, "No, there's essentially no difference. If I lose my copper coin and want to settle the score with you, you definitely won't let me." When Lu Huarong heard Zhang Liji's words, he shook his head and said, "Third senior brother, the value of this copper coin and the blueprint are definitely different. Naturally, people will think differently. There's no way to compare the two." When Zhang Liji heard this, he immediately laughed. He quickly stepped forward and patted Lu Huarong on the shoulder. He said with a smile, "You're right. The difference in value between the two is too great. There's no way to compare them." When Lu Huarong heard Zhang Liji agree with him, he let out a long sigh of relief and quickly said, "That's right. Even if you take out this copper coin, it doesn't prove that Yi Xian isn't the one who stole the blueprint." When Zhang Liji heard Lu Huarong's words, he didn't answer him. He only looked into Lu Huarong's eyes and asked with a smile, "In that case, as long as I take out something valuable for junior brother Lu to see, I'll settle the score with junior brother Lu if I lose my item. That should be fine, right?" When Lu Huarong heard Zhang Liji's words, he was suddenly stunned. He subconsciously took a step back and said hesitantly, "How can that be? You can't settle the score with me just because I took a look at your item." When Zhang Liji heard this, he shook his head and said, "Didn't you just say that the copper coin's value is too small? If I take out something more valuable, that should be fine, right?" When Lu Huarong heard Zhang Liji's words, his forehead suddenly broke out in cold sweat. He looked at Zhang Liji and couldn't say anything else. Bai Jianmu watched from the side for a long time. He thought that Lu Huarong could make Zhang Leji angry, but he didn't expect that Lu Huarong would be speechless by Zhang Leji's question. Seeing this scene, Bai Jianmu knew that it was time for him to speak. If he didn't speak, he was afraid that Lu Huarong really couldn't deal with Zhang Leji. Thinking of this, Bai Jianmu suddenly clapped his hands and said with a sneer, "Third senior fellow apprentice, you are really powerful. Junior fellow apprentice, Lu has been patient for many times, but you are not willing to give in. Really, I can't stand it anymore." Speaking of this, Bai Jianmu turned to look at Lu Huarong and asked with a smile, "Junior brother Lu, if you saw something important to third senior brother, would you steal it?" After Lu Huarong heard Bai Jianmu's question, he hurriedly shook his head and replied, "No, why would I steal third senior brother's things?" Chapter 149. Bai Jianmu nodded after hearing Lu Huarong's words. He turned to Zhang Laji and said, "Third senior brother, you heard it too. Junior brother Lu said that he wouldn't steal anything from you. You should be relieved now." Zhang Laji shook his head. "Junior brother Bai, can you guarantee that junior brother Lu wouldn't steal anything from me?" Bai Jianmu was stunned when he heard Zhang Laji's words. He didn't expect Zhang Leji's words to be so sharp. For a moment, he didn't know how to respond. However, Bai Jianmu was only stunned for a moment. After a while, he recovered and said with a laugh, "You're right. Third senior brother, I'm different from you. I won't frame someone just because I have a good relationship with someone." At this point, Bai Jianmu slowly walked to Lu Huarong's side and patted him on the shoulder. "Junior brother Lu, if you're the only one who knows where third senior brother hid his treasure and he lost it, I definitely won't protect you." Bai Jianmu turned to look at Zhang Leji and sneered. "Third senior brother, I won't protect him just because I have a good relationship with someone. Third senior brother, do you think I'm doing the right thing?" After hearing Bai Jianmu's words, Zhang Leji secretly cursed Bai Jianmu for being cunning. However, he could only say, "Yes, you're doing the right thing." After hearing Zhang Leji agree with him, Bai Jianmu said slowly, "Then, third senior brother, are you protecting Yi Xian by doing this?" Zhang Leji quickly replied, "This is different. Although Yi Xian knows where the blueprint is hidden, we didn't see him steal it. We can't prove that he stole it." After hearing Zhang Leji's words, Bai Jianmu sneered again. "Third senior brother, who are you talking to? Don't think that you can defend him just because you have a good relationship with Yi Xian. Don't forget that the place where Master hid the blueprint should be quite hidden. It's impossible for outsiders to know about it. Under such circumstances, you still want to say that Yi Xian didn't steal the blueprint? That's too suspicious." At this point, Bai Jianmu paused and suddenly asked loudly, "Third senior brother, did you steal the blueprint? That's how you know it wasn't Yi Xian who stole it. Tell me, is that right?" Zhang Leji was furious when he heard this. He pointed at Bai Jianmu and said loudly, "You're talking nonsense. Why would I steal Master's blueprint?" Bai Jianmu was secretly happy when he saw that Zhang Leji was angry. However, his expression didn't change at all. He said calmly, "Third senior brother, other than this possibility, I can't think of any other reason why you would be so sure that Yi Xian didn't steal the blueprint." After hearing Bai Jianmu's words, Zhang Leji felt a burst of anger erupt from his heart. He instantly felt his head heating up. He pointed at Bai Jianmu and said angrily, "Junior brother, is this how you behave?" "Junior Bai, could it be that this is the way of a junior? You can criticize your senior for no reason, and you're even rude to your senior? Have you forgotten the principle of respecting your seniors?" Bai Jianmu ignored Zhang Leji and turned to look at Sun Xinjing. He clasped his fist and said, "Master, I may have gone overboard with my words just now, but third senior brother's actions are really suspicious." At this point, Bai Jianmu paused and glanced at Zhang Leji before continuing. "Master, we're senior brothers. I didn't want to say much. However, third senior brother's actions are really strange. Third senior brother doesn't know who stole the blueprint, but he's so sure that it wasn't Yi Xian. Third senior brother can't point out who stole the blueprint. This is really strange. Therefore, I have reason to think that third senior brother is really capable when it comes to the matter of the blueprint. At this point, Bai Jianmu once again cupped his fists at Sun Xinjing and bowed. Only then did he continue. Am I right? Please allow your disciple to say something disrespectful. I think, if Yi Xian didn't steal the blueprint, it should be third senior brother. At this point, Bai Jianmu's tone paused for a moment before he continued, speaking in a more serious tone. In fact, it's very likely that third senior brother and senior brother Yi worked together to steal the blueprint. After Bai Jianmu finished speaking, the hall fell into silence again. After a while, Zhang Leji suddenly came to his senses. He hurried to his master and said loudly, "Master, I definitely didn't steal the blueprint. I can swear to the heavens." This time, before Zhang Leji could finish his words, Bai Jianmu had already interrupted him. Third senior brother, if swearing works, then wouldn't the world be at peace? Why would there be so many thievery cases? After hearing Bai Jianmu's words, Zhang Leji was furious. He turned around abruptly and glared at Bai Jianmu. Junior brother Bai, I think you're the most suspicious person here. As long as Yi Xian is the one who stole the blueprint, then the position of the next branch leader will be yours, Bai Jianmu. After hearing Zhang Leji's accusation, Bai Jianmu ignored him. He clasped his fist and bowed to Sun Xinjing. Master, in order to prove my innocence, I've decided not to be the branch leader. Please grant me my wish. After hearing Bai Jianmu's words, Zhang Leji was stunned. He didn't expect Bai Jianmu to say something like this. All his accusations were based on the fact that Bai Jianmu wanted to be the branch leader. If Bai Jianmu didn't want to be the branch leader, then all his accusations would be a joke. Seeing his disciples quarreling, Sun Xinjing was a little annoyed. If they could prove that Yi Xian was the one who stole the blueprint, then even Sun Xinjing had to admit that the next branch leader would definitely choose between Bai Jianmu and Zhang Leji. As for who would be chosen, it could only be decided when the time came. In any case, both of them had their own advantages. Both of them had the potential to be the branch leader and become his successor. However, before this matter was settled, the two disciples he was most satisfied with had already started fighting. Although it was just a quarrel, who knew if there would be an even fiercer competition? Sun Xinjing looked at Bai Jianmu. After that, he glanced at Zhang Leji, feeling a little hesitant. Bai Jianmu's words made a certain amount of sense. Yi Xian and Zhang Leji had a good relationship. Sun Xinjing knew this, and it was precisely because of this that he hesitated. Bai Jianmu said that Zhang Leji was the one who stole the blueprint. It was also because of this that Zhang Leji could be sure that Yi Xian wasn't the one who stole the blueprint. Otherwise, Zhang Leji wouldn't be able to be sure that Yi Xian wasn't the one who stole the blueprint. Sun Xinjing glanced at Zhang Leji, guessing in his heart if Bai Jianmu's words were true. Bai Jianmu even suspected that Zhang Leji and Yi Xian had already teamed up. He even said that the blueprint was stolen by the two of them. Chapter 150. Sun Xinjing was a little confused. Was Zhang Leji's behavior like what Bai Jianmu said? In fact, the blueprint was stolen by Zhang Leji and Yi Xian. Therefore, Zhang Leji tried his best to excuse Yi Xian. The possibility that Bai Jianmu mentioned was not impossible, but it was very likely that this was really the case. Yi Xian knew the location of the blueprint. Perhaps Yi Xian did not want to steal the blueprint, but under Zhang Leji's instigation, Yi Xian stole the blueprint. After stealing the blueprint, Yi Xian was locked up as the person who stole the blueprint. As his accomplice, he naturally could not watch his accomplice be locked up. He would definitely find a way to help him out. At this moment, what Zhang Leji did was similar to that kind of thing. Zhang Leji did not know who stole the blueprint, but he insisted that the blueprint was definitely not taken by Yi Xian. What did this mean? Not only that, Zhang Leji did not suspect Yi Xian, who knew the location of the blueprint. What did this mean? At this moment, Sun Xinjing had a sudden realization after Bai Jianmu's reminder. Could it be that this matter was really related to Zhang Leji? Although Sun Xinjing did not want any of his disciples to steal the blueprint, if he knew who stole the blueprint, he would definitely not let this person go. No matter who this person was, Sun Xinjing would not let them go. Yi Xian was the best example. Yi Xian was Sun Xinjing's best disciple, and also his most trusted disciple. When he learned that Yi Xian was the person who stole the blueprint, he did not let Yi Xian go. He did not hesitate to lock him up in the penitence pavilion. In Sun Xinjing's view, betraying the sect was absolutely unforgivable. No matter who this person was, Sun Xinjing would not forgive him. Looking at Zhang Leji in front of him, Sun Xinjing had a trace of suspicion in his heart. Zhang Leji's behavior today was too suspicious. He could not point out who stole the blueprint, but he insisted that Yi Xian was definitely not the person who stole it. What was his basis? Sun Xinjing did not know what Zhang Leji's basis was. How could he be so sure that Yi Xian was not the person who stole the blueprint? Thinking of this, Sun Xinjing looked at Zhang Leji and asked slowly, "What do you have to say?" Zhang Leji heard his master's question and saw his expression didn't his master's expression. He knew something was wrong. He quickly explained himself. He quickly explained, "Master, this has nothing to do with this matter. Just based on the fact that he knew where the blueprint was hiding. Is. Sun Xinjing heard this and snorted coldly. Since that's the case, you say that Yi Xian is not the person who stole the blueprint. Then, tell me, who is the person who stole the blueprint?" At this point, Sun Xinjing's gaze sharpened, and he said in a more serious tone, "You can say who stole the blueprint, but you can't frame your own fellow disciples. If you don't have any evidence, don't blame me for punishing you if you say it like that." After Zhang Leji heard Sun Xinjing's words, he must have been so scared that his forehead was covered in cold sweat. His heart was also beating a lot faster. At this point, Zhang Leji understood that his master was suspecting him. He was suspecting whether this matter had anything to do with him. Zhang Leji glanced at Bai Jianmu and saw that he was looking at him coldly. There was a trace of disdain at the corner of his mouth. It was as if he was mocking his own ignorance. Seeing this scene, Zhang Leji's heart burned with anger. He clearly had good intentions and wanted to find the person who stole the blueprint for his sect, but he didn't expect that things would develop to this point. In the end, he actually became the one who stole the blueprint. Looking at the sneering Bai Jianmu, Zhang Leji knew that if he didn't explain this matter clearly, he would definitely be in the same group as Yi Xian. When that time came, he would definitely be locked up in the repentance pavilion and accompany Yi Xian. However, although Zhang Leji knew where the problem was, he couldn't say it. Sun Xinjing had already said that if he said that Yi Xian wasn't the one who stole the blueprint, then he had to say who was the one who stole the blueprint. The most important thing was that Sun Xinjing had emphasized in the end that he was not allowed to frame his own fellow disciples. The meaning of Sun Xinjing's words made Zhang Leji feel very uncomfortable. Zhang Leji was certain that the person who stole the blueprint was definitely one of his fellow disciples. In fact, it wasn't just one person, but a few people working together to do this. His master didn't want him to frame his fellow disciples. He also wanted him to have real evidence before he could say who the person who stole the blueprint was. How should he answer this matter? If Zhang Leji dared to casually say someone, then Sun Xinjing would ask him if he had any real evidence. Zhang Leji naturally didn't have any real evidence because he didn't know who was the one who stole the blueprint. Eldest senior brother LV Kong didn't care about the matters of the South County branch. He only wanted to study the mechanism technique. Was there no doubt about such a person? Zhang Leji felt that something was wrong. It was precisely because eldest senior brother LV Kong didn't want to care about the trivial matters of the South County branch. He studied the mechanism technique every day. Could it be that the precious blueprint wasn't attractive to such a person? Zhang Leji felt that it was the exact opposite. That precious blueprint was definitely more attractive to LV Kong than any treasure. This meant that eldest senior brother LV Kong was very likely to steal the blueprint for his own research. Was it impossible for second senior brother Tang Jianan to steal the blueprint? Zhang Leji felt that it was impossible. Tang Jianan's talent in mechanism techniques was not high. It was precisely because his talent in mechanism techniques was not high that he lost the ability to compete for the position of a division leader. In order to improve his mechanism techniques, Tang Jinan might also steal the precious blueprint to improve his mechanism techniques. When his mechanism techniques improved, he would naturally have a chance to compete for the position of a division leader. From the looks of it, second senior brother Tang Jinan might also steal the blueprint to improve his mechanism techniques. It was even more likely that he would steal the blueprint because his talent was not as good as Yi Xian's. However, after obtaining the blueprint, his mechanism techniques would definitely improve by a lot. At that time, he could rely on his mechanism techniques to surpass Bai Jianmu and become the next successor of the division leader. It could be said that if he wanted to become a division leader, he had to steal the blueprint to improve his mechanism techniques. Not only that, the possibility of him stealing the blueprint was very high. His mechanism techniques and Bai Jianmu's were already on par. If he used the effect of the blueprint to improve his mechanism techniques, he would definitely be able to surpass Bai Jianmu. At that time, he would definitely be able to become a division leader. Therefore, there were simply too many benefits to stealing the blueprint. At this moment, Zhang Leji was a little tempted. He even thought that if the blueprint was really in his hands, it would definitely be a good thing. Chapter 151. If fourth junior brother Yi Xian could steal the blueprint, there would naturally be many benefits. The key was that after he stole the blueprint, no one would suspect him. This was because if there were no accidents, he would be the next leader. No one would think that he had stolen the blueprint. Yi Xian could do this without arousing suspicion. It could even be said that he could use this to suppress his opponents. It could be said that if Yi Xian stole the blueprint, there would be too many benefits. In this case, it was not impossible for Yi Xian to steal the blueprint. As for fifth junior brother Bai Jianmu, if he stole the blueprint, there would be even more benefits. First of all, after he stole the blueprint, he could study the mechanism technique himself. On the other hand, he could frame Yi Xian for stealing the blueprint. With this matter, he could expel Yi Xian from the sect. Then, Bai Jianmu, who was the second most talented in the South County branch, would naturally become the next leader. Therefore, in order to become the leader, Bai Jianmu stole the blueprint and framed Yi Xian. He would expel Yi Xian from the sect and become the leader of the South County branch. At the thought of this, Zhang Leji even thought that even if Bai Jianmu did not steal the blueprint, but some other fellow disciple did, Bai Jianmu could still follow his original plan and suppress Yi Xian to achieve his goal of becoming a branch leader. In that case, Bai Jianmu might be the one who stole the blueprint, or he might not be the one who stole the blueprint. This was because regardless of whether he stole the blueprint or not, he would still benefit from it. It was not impossible for sixth junior brother Lu Huarong to steal the blueprint. Lu Huarong was usually quiet and would not attract the attention of others. If he stole the blueprint, it could be said that he would not attract the attention of others. In fact, no one would even think that he was the one who stole the blueprint. This was because no one would think that Lu Huarong, who had always been quiet, would steal the blueprint. Logically speaking, Zhang Leji would not suspect a person like Lu Huarong. However, his performance today was too active. It was as if he had become a different person. He could not accept it. It was also because of these changes in Lu Huarong that Zhang Leji began to suspect him. He suspected that Lu Huarong had stolen those blueprints. However, Zhang Leji thought about it again. If the blueprint was really taken by Lu Huarong, then why was he so active today? Could it be that he wanted to attract his attention and make him suspect him? Zhang Leji felt that Lu Huarong couldn't be that stupid. Since he could do something like taking the blueprint, he definitely wouldn't do something so stupid. Therefore, the fact that Lu Huarong stole the blueprint was only a suspicion. There were too many suspicious points, and it was impossible to prove it. Lu Huarong could only say that there was a 50% chance that he would steal the blueprints. Seventh junior brother, Mei Guangji, had a good relationship with Yi Xian. However, could this be a reason for him to steal the blueprint? Zhang Leji felt that this was too far-fetched. Seventh junior brother, Mei Guangji, was young and very sincere. More importantly, even if he stole the blueprint, he could not become a branch leader. Regarding this point, Zhang Leji ruled him out. This was because even if 7th junior brother stole the blueprint, he could only improve his own skills. Moreover, he could not use this kind of skill easily. This was because if he used it, it would definitely be discovered by others. Therefore, the possibility of him stealing the blueprint was not high. 8th junior sister, Li Shuyan, was too young and was a girl. Zhang Leji directly ruled her out. This was because even if 8th junior sister stole the blueprint, the result would be the same as 7th junior brother. Zhang Leji quickly thought about the possibility of his seniors and juniors stealing the blueprint. In the end, he was shocked to find out. Other than 7th junior brother and 8th junior sister, the rest of them could have stolen the blueprint. This was because after they obtained the blueprint, it would bring them benefits. After stealing the blueprint, who would benefit the most? Of course, it would be the 5th junior brother by Jianmu. He would benefit the most. He could use this opportunity to push Yi Xian out and become the next leader's successor. However, Zhang Leji carefully thought about Bai Jianmu's suspicions. He was shocked to find that if Bai Jianmu did not steal the blueprint, it would be more beneficial to him. This was because as long as Bai Jianmu stole the blueprint, no matter how long it took, it would be discovered by others. Even if he became the branch leader, it would definitely not be good for his reputation. Therefore, if it was someone else who had stolen the blueprints, Bai Jianmu would be able to make use of this opportunity to gain the greatest benefits. Not only that, he wouldn't have to bear the crime of stealing the blueprints and would naturally become the next branch leader's successor. In this way, the possibility of Bai Jianmu stealing the blueprint would be the smallest. Thinking of this, Zhang Leji turned his head and looked at Bai Jianmu. He was hesitant in his heart. He wondered if Bai Jianmu was the one who did this, or Bai Jianmu said that someone else was the one who did it. Thinking of this, Zhang Leji turned his head and looked at Lu Huarong. He guessed that Bai Jianmu might have instigated Lu Huarong to steal the blueprints. If that was the case, then this matter would be perfect. Lu Huarong could improve his skills, and Bai Jianmu could use this to achieve his own goals. Wouldn't this be killing two birds with one stone? Thinking of this, Zhang Leji felt that his guess was right. It should not be far from the actual situation. However, Zhang Leji thought about it again. Tang Jianan was still here. What role did Tang Jianan play in this? Zhang Leji glanced at Tang Jianan and saw him looking at him with a smile. When Tang Jianan saw Zhang Leji looking at him, Tang Jianan even smiled and nodded at him. Seeing this scene, Zhang Leji felt a headache. Tang Jianan, Bai Jianmu, and Lu Huarong. Looking at their performance today, they must have already joined forces. If Bai Jianmu instigated Lu Huarong to steal the blueprint, then after Lu Huarong stole the blueprint, Bai Jianmu would start to push this matter to Yi Xian and use this as an excuse to expel Yi Xian from the sect. However, what benefits could Tang Jianan obtain? If he couldn't obtain any benefits, why would he join Bai Jianmu's team? Zhang Leji felt that Tang Jianan must have obtained some benefits. Otherwise, he wouldn't join Bai Jianmu's team. This was also what Zhang Leji was suspicious about. What benefits could Tang Jianan obtain from this? Regarding this point, Zhang Leji still couldn't figure out what benefits Tang Jianan would obtain. Or rather, Zhang Leji's heart suddenly moved. Could it be that Tang Jianan was the one who stole the blueprint? Bai Jianmu instigated Tang Jianan to steal the blueprint and then used it to threaten Tang Jianan, forcing Tang Jianan to join his camp to achieve his goal of becoming the leader. Chapter 152. Looking at the smiling Tang Jianan, Zhang Leji didn't know if he was right, but he could only think this way. This was because if one didn't think about it carefully, they wouldn't feel anything. However, when one thought about it carefully, one would find that this matter was very strange. Everyone was a suspect, and there was a possibility that they would steal the blueprints. In fact, it could even be said that this included himself. Zhang Leji hadn't thought about this problem before. Now that he thought about it, it really made sense. If he stole the blueprint, there would be too many benefits. He could frame Yi Xian or Bai Jianmu at will. As long as the two of them were the scapegoats, then he would definitely be able to become the next branch master successor. Thinking of this, Zhang Leji's heart was filled with vigilance. He knew that since he could think of this, Bai Jianmu should have thought of it as well. Not only that, his master should have thought of it as well. If he stole the blueprint, it would bring him great benefits. Seeing that Zhang Leji didn't answer his question for a long time, Sun Xinjing was a little impatient. He was already in a bad mood. When he thought of his own things being stolen by his own disciples, no one would be in a good mood at this moment. The reason why Sun Xinjing accepted them as his disciples was because he trusted them. However, this kind of trust was exchanged for this kind of result. No matter who it was, they wouldn't be happy about it. Looking at Zhang Leji in front of him, Sun Xinjing was also suspicious. Zhang Leji hadn't answered his question for a long time, and his eyes were flickering. With a glance, he knew that Zhang Leji was thinking about something. Not only that, Zhang Leji's gaze was also looking at his fellow disciples. Seeing this scene, Sun Xinjing was even more suspicious. He guessed that Zhang Leji wanted to frame someone and make them take the blame. Thinking of this possibility, Sun Xinjing couldn't bear it anymore. He slammed the table and said angrily, "I asked you a question. Why aren't you answering?" Zhang Leji, who was deep in thought with his head lowered, was startled by the sound of his master slamming the table. He suddenly reacted and hurriedly cupped his hands towards Sun Xinjing. "Master, this disciple is thinking about the whole story of this matter and who would do such a thing." After hearing Zhang Leji's words, Sun Xinjing snorted coldly. "Then what did you think of? Hurry up and tell me." After Zhang Leji heard Sun Xinjing's words, he was stunned at first. He pondered in his heart how he should answer his master's question. What he thought just now was just a guess. He didn't have any evidence to prove that someone stole it. How should he answer? Sun Xinjing had already said that he could not say anything without solid evidence. Could it be that he was just going to keep quiet like this? Zhang Leji knew that if I didn't say anything now, once Master announced the end, Yi Xian probably wouldn't have another chance. After today, no one would talk about this matter anymore. They would all be sure that Yi Xian stole the blueprint. Not only that, would Yi Xian be forced to hand over the blueprint? If the blueprint was really taken by Yi Xian, then he could hand it over. But if it wasn't stolen by Yi Xian, then where would Yi Xian get the blueprint from? Since they had already determined that Yi Xian stole the blueprint and Yi Xian didn't hand it over, then Zhang Leji was certain that Yi Xian's fate would be very tragic. When that happened, it would be great if he could be expelled from the sect. The worst thing would be that he would be locked up for the rest of his life. Or rather, he would be locked up until he handed over the blueprint. The key point was, if the blueprint wasn't stolen by Yi Xian, then where would he get it from? Thinking about the outcome of this matter, Zhang Leji couldn't help but break out in a cold sweat. If Yi Xian were to encounter such a thing in the end, his fate would be extremely tragic. Thinking about Yi Xian's fate, Zhang Leji thought about himself. If this matter continued, he was afraid that he would follow in Yi Xian's footsteps. Thinking of this, Zhang Leji knew that he couldn't hold back anymore. If he hesitated, not only would he not be able to help Yi Xian, but he would also be implicated. He had to tell everyone about this matter. Regardless of whether there was evidence or not, he had to let Master know that everyone could have stolen the blueprint, not just Yi Xian. Thinking of this, Zhang Leji wiped the cold sweat on his forehead, cupped his hands towards Sun Xinjing, and said respectfully, "Master, your disciple has thought about it carefully and analyzed the possibilities of my fellow disciples doing this. Would you be willing to listen?" Sun Xinjing was stunned when he heard this. Then, he sneered in his heart. He guessed that Zhang Leji was still trying to quibble. Based on what Bai Jianmu said just now, Sun Xinjing felt that Zhang Leji was very likely to have something to do with this matter. If Zhang Leji stole the blueprint, then no matter what he did, it would be beneficial to him. If Yi Xian was in cahoots with him, then Yi Xian would be locked up. If Zhang Leji was framing Bai Jianmu as the person who stole the blueprint, then among the remaining disciples, Sun Xinjing was certain that Zhang Leji would become the leader. This was because Zhang Leji's talent in mechanics was second only to Yi Xian and Bai Jianmu. It could even be said that Zhang Leji's mechanics had surpassed Bai Jianmu in some aspects. If Yi Xian and Bai Jianmu were both implicated by the blueprint, then the person who benefited the most would naturally be Zhang Leji. After Zhang Leji stole the blueprint, he could cultivate the knowledge on the blueprint and improve his mechanism skills. This was only one of the benefits. The other benefit was that he could 100% become the leader of the South County branch. Without the threat of Yi Xian and Bai Jianmu, Zhang Leji was the best candidate for the leader among the remaining disciples. This meant that Zhang Leji was very likely to steal the blueprint. This was also the reason why Sun Xinjing suspected Zhang Leji. As for Bai Jianmu, Sun Xinjing also suspected that Bai Jianmu stole the blueprint and framed Yi Xian. This possibility was not impossible. Sun Xinjing also thought that if Bai Jianmu stole the blueprint, then he would benefit even more than Zhang Leji. This was because Bai Jianmu's talent in mechanics was second only to Yi Xian. Among Sun Xinjing's many disciples, he was ranked second. Since Yi Xian had been locked up, Bai Jianmu naturally became the next leader of the branch. Ever since Yi Xian was locked up, Sun Xinjing had also considered this problem. His original plan was to pass the position of leader to Yi Xian. However, Yi Xian stole the blueprint and disrupted Sun Xinjing's plan. Since Yi Xian could no longer be the successor, then he could only choose another person. Among all the disciples, Bai Jianmu was undoubtedly the best candidate. Chapter 153. Sun Xinjing looked at Bai Jianmu and had some doubts in his heart. If Yi Xian could not become the next leader of the South County branch, then Bai Jianmu and Zhang Leji would become the candidates for the next leader. Knowing this situation, would Bai Jianmu choose to steal the blueprint and frame Yi Xian? Then he would take this opportunity to achieve his goal. Sun Xinjing looked at Zhang Leji and then at Bai Jianmu. He knew in his heart that if there were no accidents after he left the South County branch, one of these two people would become the leader of the South County branch. However, what exactly was going on with the blueprint? Until now, Sun Xinjing was also a little puzzled. Would Yi Xian steal the blueprint? Would Zhang Leji steal the blueprint? Would Bai Jianmu steal the blueprint? Would others steal the blueprint? This series of things gave Sun Xinjing a headache. What was the truth about the blueprint? The reason why Yi Xian knew the location of the blueprint was because Sun Xinjing had once brought him to the place where the blueprint was placed. At that time, Sun Xinjing trusted Yi Xian very much, which was why he brought him to the place where the blueprint was placed. Sun Xinjing really wanted to groom Yi Xian as the next successor and let him become the leader of the South County branch. However, when he thought of this, Sun Xinjing felt a wave of anger in his heart. Yi Xian betrayed him and stole his blueprint. Sun Xinjing would never forgive him for this. No matter who it was, Sun Xinjing would never forgive them for betraying him. It was precisely because of this that Yi Xian was locked up in the Repentance Pavilion. However, Zhang Leji said that Yi Xian was not the one who stole the blueprint. He was framed. Sun Xinjing was a little skeptical about what Zhang Leji said. This was because only Yi Xian knew where the blueprint was placed. The place where the blueprint was placed did not mean that one only needed to know the location, but there was a mechanism there. Even if one found the location where the blueprint was placed, if one did not know the way to activate the mechanism, they could only stand outside and not enter. It was precisely because of this reason that Sun Xinjing suspected that Yi Xian was the one who did it. Although Yi Xian was a good person, Sun Xinjing felt that he did not dare to say anything in front of that blueprint. In Sun Xinjing's eyes, that blueprint was extremely precious. Even if all the treasures in the world were combined, they would not be able to compare to a corner of this blueprint. His master had spent half of his life studying. It was not a trivial matter. It was also because of this blueprint that Sun Xinjing had made up his mind to look for his master to research mechanical techniques together. However, such a precious thing had actually disappeared in front of his eyes. How could this not make Sun Xinjing extremely angry? Yi Xian, Zhang Leji, and Bai Jianmu in front of him, these three people should be the most suspicious in Sun Xinjing's eyes. Both Zhang Liji and Bai Jianmu might use this matter to achieve their goals. In other words, after this matter happened, they would be able to obtain the greatest benefits. Sun Xinjing saw this very clearly. As for the others, Sun Xinjing felt that they were less suspicious. This was because regardless of whether the blueprint was lost or not, they would not obtain the greatest benefits. In the entire South County branch, the greatest benefit was, of course, the position of the branch leader. However, after the blueprint was lost, only Zhang Laji and Bai Jimu would benefit from it. His eldest disciple, LV Wunkong, was the same as him. He wanted to study the mechanism technique and did not have any thoughts about the position of the branch leader. Therefore, Sun Xinjing did not suspect his eldest disciple, LV Wunkong, at all. This was because doing so would not benefit him at all. Even if his second disciple, Tang Jinan, lost the blueprint, it did not seem to have anything to do with him. Tang Jinan's talent was still a little inferior among his fellow disciples. In terms of mechanism technique, his skills were not very high. Even if such a person stole the blueprint, he would not obtain the greatest benefits. Just as Sun Xinjing thought of this, Zhang Laji had already quarreled with him again. He cupped his fists and bowed. "Master, if you don't blame me, then I will analyze the whole matter." When Sun Xinjing heard this, he thought for a moment before nodding his head. "All right, go ahead." At this point, Sun Xinjing glanced around and said loudly, "Everyone is here. Listen to what he has to say and think about who did this." When everyone heard this, they all nodded in agreement. Zhang Laji looked at everyone's expression again before he said slowly, "Since that's the case, I will analyze it one by one." At this point, Zhang Laji turned to look at his eldest senior brother, LV Wunkong, and cupped his fist before he said slowly, "Now, let's talk about our eldest senior brother." At this point, Zhang Liji's tone became more serious. He looked at his eldest senior brother, LV Wunkong, and saw that after hearing this, LV Wunkong's expression changed obviously. He could not help but narrow his eyes and look over. Seeing this, Zhang Liji sighed in his heart. He knew that no matter what he said, he would eventually offend his eldest senior brother. However, if he did not say it, according to his judgment just now, he would not have the chance to say it in the future, even if he wanted to. This was because after today, if this matter was not resolved, Bai Jimu would definitely get rid of him. At that time, even if he wanted to say something, he would not have the chance. Thinking of this, Yi Xian looked apologetically at his eldest senior brother, LV Wunkong, and said, "Eldest senior brother, I'm sorry. I didn't mean anything else. I just wanted to analyze the matter between us. Please don't blame me." After hearing Zhang Liji's words, LV Wunkong nodded and said with a smile, "Third junior brother, feel free to say it. I won't blame you. Don't worry. Just say it and let everyone hear it. I, LV Wunkong, will definitely not do anything to let Master down." At this point, LV Wunkong cupped his fists and bowed to his master, Sun Xinjing. Seeing this, Sun Xinjing smiled and nodded. He was very confident in his eldest disciple, LV Wunkong. After all, his eldest senior brother had no intention of competing for the position of a division leader. He was focused on researching mechanisms. How could such a person do such a bad thing? Seeing the smile on his master's face, LV Wunkong nodded in satisfaction. He turned to look at Zhang Liji and said with a smile, "Third junior brother, then you can start. Don't worry, just say it. Master and I won't blame you." Seeing the smile on LV Wunkong's face, Zhang Liji's heart couldn't help but skip a beat. He knew that his eldest senior brother Li Wunkong was smiling right now, but when he heard his analysis, his smile would probably disappear completely. Chapter 154. Hearing Zhang Liji say that he wanted to analyze the possibility of his fellow disciples doing this, a sneer appeared on Bai Jianmu's face. Bai Jianmu knew that as long as Zhang Liji said it, he would offend everyone. At that time, Zhang Liji would have no way out. Unless he could find the real person who stole the blueprint, it would be very difficult for Zhang Liji to stay in the South County branch. After all, what he was going to say later would offend all his fellow disciples. As for finding the real person who stole the blueprint, Bai Jianmu only sneered. It was just a dream. Next, he was going to watch a good show. Zhang Leji also heard Bai Jianmu's cold snort and knew what he was thinking. However, at this time, he had no way out. He could only continue. Thinking of this, Zhang Leji once again cupped his fists at his eldest senior brother LV Wonkong and said loudly, "Eldest senior brother, I won't stand on ceremony then." LV Wonkong heard this and waved his hand with a smile. "You're welcome. Hurry up and say it. Everyone is waiting anxiously." Hearing this, Zhang Leji nodded and looked at the eldest senior brother apologetically. Then, he slowly said, "What we're talking about today is about the blueprint. Master's blueprint is missing, and the person who stole the blueprint must be one of us. I don't think anyone has any doubts about this, right?" Speaking of this, Zhang Leji paused for a moment before continuing. "Since it was one of us who stole it, of course Yi Xian, who knows the location of the blueprint, is definitely the most suspicious. Everyone won't doubt this, right?" Speaking of this, Zhang Leji paused and looked around. He looked at the expressions of his fellow disciples before continuing. "However, just because Yi Xian knows the location of the blueprint, I feel that it's unfair to assume that he stole the blueprint. That's why I gathered everyone here today to discuss this matter. First, let's talk about what benefits you will get if the blueprint is obtained by everyone. As you know, no one will do something without benefits. It's the same for blueprints. Only those who need the blueprint will treat it as a treasure. As for those who don't need the blueprint, even if you give it to them, they probably won't want it. That's why I want to talk about what benefits you will get after obtaining this blueprint." At this point, Zhang Leji paused and turned to look at eldest senior brother LV Wonkong. He nodded apologetically before he continued. "First, let's talk about eldest senior brother. We all know that he doesn't have any thoughts about the position of the branch leader. What he likes the most is to quietly study mechanism techniques every day. It can be said that no one can compare to his perseverance in studying mechanism techniques. When it comes to studying mechanism techniques, in order to study, he's to study to understand a matter to pay. He would pay any price. He would to study to understand something. He would pay any price. Would such a person would steal a blueprint? Study to LTO2s, to the other senior brother, was to last to senior brother. Li Shuiyin didn't expect Zhang Leji to ask her such a question. She was stunned for a moment before replying softly. "No, I don't think eldest senior brother would steal a blueprint." After hearing Li Shuiyin's reply, Zhang Leji nodded and continued. "Logically speaking, someone like eldest senior brother who studies mechanism techniques wholeheartedly wouldn't steal something." Speaking of this, Zhang Leji paused for a moment. He looked around before continuing. "However, what we lost is a blueprint. It's an extremely precious blueprint. I think everyone knows the value of this blueprint. It can be said that no matter who it is, as long as someone who understands mechanism techniques obtains this blueprint, their skill level in mechanism techniques will increase greatly. This blueprint might be given to someone who doesn't know anything about mechanisms, and that person wouldn't want it. However, as long as someone knows about mechanisms, they would treat it as a treasure. It can even be said that the deeper one's understanding of mechanisms, the more they would understand the value of this blueprint." Speaking up to this point, Zhang Leji turned his head to look at eldest senior brother LV Wonkong and asked with a smile, "Eldest senior brother, am I right? The more you study mechanisms, the more you understand the value of this blueprint." LV Wonkong nodded. "That's true. Those who don't understand mechanism techniques won't be able to understand the blueprint easily. How would they know the value of this blueprint?" After hearing LV Wonkong's reply, Zhang Leji smiled and said, "Therefore, to those who don't understand mechanism techniques, this blueprint is just a piece of scrap paper. However, in eldest senior brother's eyes, it's the best treasure in the world. Am I right, eldest senior brother?" After hearing Zhang Leji's question, LV Wonkong nodded. Just as he was about to answer, his expression suddenly changed. Then he asked loudly, "Third junior brother, are you doubting me?" After hearing LV Wonkong's question, Zhang Leji shook his head and replied, "Eldest senior brother, there's no doubt now. There's only one person who will benefit from it. Speaking of this, Zhang Leji paused for a while before continuing. Eldest senior brother knows the value of this blueprint. Furthermore, eldest senior brother has been studying mechanism techniques wholeheartedly. I think this blueprint is probably the best treasure in the world in eldest senior brother's eyes. If eldest senior brother wants to steal this blueprint to study mechanism techniques, do you think it's possible for us to do it? After hearing Zhang Leji's words, LV Wenkong was instantly enraged. He pointed at Zhang Leji and said angrily, "Even if I like studying mechanism techniques, I still understand the principle of respecting my teacher. Before master announces the blueprint, I can't steal it privately." Speaking of this, LV Wenkong took a few deep breaths to calm his agitated mood before continuing. Third junior brother, I, LV Wenkong, am not that kind of person. I'm not the kind of person who would steal master's blueprint. Speaking of this, LV Wenkong turned to look at Sun Xinjing and cupped his fists. Master, this matter definitely has nothing to do with me. Master, please investigate thoroughly. After hearing Zhang Leji's words, Sun Xinjing's heart skipped a beat. According to Zhang Leji's words, LV Wenkong might really steal the blueprint. In order to study mechanism techniques, LV Wenkong had even given up the position of a branch leader. He had paid such a huge price just to study mechanism techniques wholeheartedly. In LV Wenkong's eyes, this blueprint was simply a priceless treasure. This was something that Sun Xinjing believed without a doubt. This was because he was also the kind of person who liked to study mechanism techniques. Sun Xinjing studied the blueprint carefully after his master sent it to him, and after a period of study. Chapter 155. After Fang Tianji sent the blueprint over, Sun Xinjing treated it like a treasure. Sun Xinjing wondered if he would steal it if he knew that someone else had it. Sun Xinjing's heart sank when he thought of this possibility. This was a very possible matter. LV Wenkong, who was wholeheartedly researching mechanism techniques, in order to improve his mechanism techniques, would steal this blueprint. It was also possible. After all, it could be said that LV Wenkong had given up everything for the sake of his skills. LV Wenkong did not want to be a branch leader. He did not even have a wife or children. He did not think about these things. He only had the skills in his heart. Would such a person be tempted by such a precious blueprint? To be honest, Sun Xinjing was a little suspicious. After Zhang Leji's reminder, he doubted that Li Wenkong would do such a thing. After hearing LV Wenkong's explanation, Sun Xinjing did not say anything. Instead, he turned to look at Zhang Leji. When Zhang Leji saw his master looking over, he sighed and slowly said, "Master, eldest senior brother has given up everything for the mechanical engineering technique. It can be said that as long as he can improve his mechanical engineering technique, I think eldest senior brother will do anything. Therefore, eldest senior brother will very likely steal this blueprint." LV Wenkong flew into a rage after hearing Zhang Leji's words. He took 2 steps forward and walked to Zhang Leji's side. He reached out and grabbed Zhang Leji. "Third junior brother, we have no grudges. Why do you want to frame me? Tell me clearly today why you want to frame me." Zhang Leji shook his head after hearing LV Wenkong's accusation. He smiled bitterly and said, "Eldest senior brother, I am not framing you. This is just my analysis." Zhang Leji paused for a moment, looked at LV Wenkong, and smiled bitterly before continuing. "Senior brother, please forgive me for my rudeness. If eldest senior brother really stole that blueprint, would it be of help to your mechanical arts? Would it immediately improve your mechanical arts?" After LV Wenkong heard Zhang Leji's question, he was stunned at first. Then he let go of Zhang Leji and nodded sadly. Then he shouted again, "Brother Zhang Leji, but even so, I can't possibly steal master's blueprints. Third junior brother, please believe me. I really can't steal master's blueprints. I, LV Wenkong, would never do such a thing." At this point, LV Wenkong's gaze once again turned to Sun Xinjing as he shouted, "Master, this matter really wasn't done by this disciple. Master, please investigate thoroughly." When Sun Xinjing heard this, he waved his hand and said in a low voice, "Step aside first. Let's listen to what others have to say first." After LV Wenkong heard Sun Xinjing's words, the expression on his face suddenly froze. He didn't dare to say what he wanted to say next. He could only stand aside with his head lowered. Seeing LV Wenkong stand aside, Sun Xinjing then turned to the rest of the disciples and asked, "What do you guys think?" After hearing Sun Xinjing's words, everyone was stunned. Then they shook their heads. Seeing this scene, Sun Xinjing was somewhat annoyed. He pointed his finger at Tang Jianan and loudly said, "You are the second senior brother. You should be the first to speak. What is your opinion on this matter?" After being called out by his master, Tang Jianan was stunned. He looked at Sun Xinjing and didn't know what to do. He really didn't expect things to develop to this stage. He thought that the person he was targeting today was only Zhang Leji. He didn't expect his master to ask him to express his opinion on LV Wenkong. What should he say? Should he say that LV Wenkong could have stolen the blueprint? Or should he say that LV Wenkong couldn't have stolen the blueprint? If he said that LV Wenkong had stolen the blueprint, he would offend him directly. This was different from the original plan. However, if he said that LV Wenkong couldn't have stolen the blueprint, Tang Jianan probably wouldn't believe it himself. LV Wenkong had given up everything in order to study the mechanism technique. Tang Jianan knew this very well. If LV Wenkong had stolen the blueprint in order to study the mechanism technique, logically speaking, with LV Wenkong's concentration on the mechanism technique, this was definitely possible. After all, LV Wenkong could give up everything for the mechanism technique. It could be said that the mechanism technique was his only thing. Although Yi Xian was said to be the best in the mechanism technique among the next generation of disciples, he was still a distance away from LV Wenkong. In the South County branch, other than his master, Sun Xinjing, no one could compare to LV Wenkong's mechanism technique. Not only that, some people even suspected that LV Wenkong's mechanism technique had already surpassed his master, Sun Xinjing. After all, Sun Xinjing was the branch master of the South County branch. He had wasted too much of his time dealing with trivial matters. On the other hand, LV Wenkong was different. He did not need to deal with the matters of the South County branch, nor did he need to consider the problems of his wife and children. In fact, he only took in one disciple, and this only disciple was only there to be his assistant. Therefore, the time LV Wenkong spent studying the mechanism technique far exceeded that of his master, Sun Xinjing. It was very possible that his mechanism technique had already surpassed his master's. At their level, it could be said that they had reached a kind of bottleneck. It was already very difficult for them to increase their strength further. It was even more difficult to break through this bottleneck by themselves. At this time, if they had this blueprint, then the situation would immediately be different. Under the guidance of this blueprint, the bottleneck that was difficult to break through would soon be broken through, and they would enter the next stage. To a mechanism master, this kind of attraction was simply irresistible. After hearing Zhang Leji's words, even Tang Jianan believed it. He believed that LV Wenkong had indeed stolen the blueprint. In order to break through his bottleneck, LV Wenkong had stolen this blueprint to achieve his goal. This kind of guess was very likely to happen. Under such circumstances, if Tang Jianan said that LV Wenkong had not stolen the blueprint, even he himself would not believe it. Not only that, if Tang Jianan said that LV Wenkong had not stolen the blueprint, his master would definitely think that there was something wrong with it. If he could not see such an obvious thing, his second senior brother would be too retarded. However, if LV Wenkong had stolen the blueprint, then wouldn't today's plan be ruined? The original plan was to anger Zhang Leji and then wait for Zhang Leji to get angry. Then, when Zhang Leji was angry, he would take the opportunity to drag him down so that he would not be able to drag this matter out. However, a problem appeared. If LV Wenkong might have stolen the blueprint, then wouldn't the previous plan be in vain? Zhang Leji could easily get rid of the implication of this matter and jump out of the picture. He would become an outsider. It would not be easy to implicate him in this matter again. Chapter 156. This kind of result was not what Tang Jianan wanted. What they wanted was to make Zhang Leji angry and then use this opportunity to implicate Zhang Leji. However, the situation had changed, and Tang Jianan was caught off guard. In the end, the eldest senior brother, LV Wenkong, who was the least suspected, was also suspected. Not only that, this suspicion was so convincing. Tang Jianan turned to look at his fellow apprentices and found that they all had a look of doubt in their eyes. Tang Jianan knew that Zhang Leji's words had worked. Now, everyone believed that LV Wenkong was the one who stole the blueprint. That was because LV Wenkong did have the motive and reason to steal the blueprint. In the South County branch, eldest senior brother LV Wenkong did not want to fight for the position of the branch leader. Everyone knew about this very well. They also admired eldest senior brother LV Wenkong's character. They also admired him for giving up everything in order to study the mechanism technique. However, at this moment, this admirable thing had turned into evidence. LV Wenkong could give up everything in order to learn more advanced mechanism techniques. This meant that in his eyes, only mechanism techniques were what he wanted the most. If that was the case, wouldn't that mean that this blueprint was also the thing he wanted the most? For the sake of mechanism techniques, the eldest senior brother, LV Wenkong, could give up everything. In other words, in order to learn mechanism techniques, the eldest senior brother, LV Wenkong, could do anything, including stealing the blueprint. Everyone knew that as long as LV Wenkong obtained the blueprint, his mechanism techniques would definitely improve by leaps and bounds. No one doubted this. On one hand, the eldest senior brother, LV Wenkong, liked to study mechanism techniques. On the other hand, he did have extraordinary talent in this aspect. Once the eldest senior brother, LV Wenkong, obtained this blueprint, he would break through his bottleneck in mechanism techniques in a short period of time and reach a new height. And this result was exactly what LV Wenkong wanted. It was something that he had been pursuing for his entire life. Everyone looked at eldest senior brother LV Wenkong. At this moment, LV Wenkong's expression of righteous indignation seemed to be an act in everyone's eyes. All of this was done by him. He had pretended to feel that way so that everyone would believe that he hadn't stolen the blueprint. Seeing this, Tang Jianan could only sigh. Things had developed to this point. If he said that it was impossible for LV Wenkong to steal the blueprint, then he would be suspected in his master's eyes. Tang Jianan wanted to say that LV Wenkong was a suspect, but he was unwilling to do so. Originally, the situation in the hall was within expectations. However, in just a short period of time, a shocking change had occurred. Not only did Zhang Leji quickly get rid of his suspicions, but he also ruined their plan. At this point, Tang Jianan had no other choice. He turned his head to look at Bai Jianmu, wanting to see what he meant. But when he turned his head to look at Bai Jianmu, he was disappointed. Bai Jianmu was looking at the ground with his head lowered. He had no intention of speaking. Helpless, Tang Jianan turned his gaze to Lu Huarong. Lu Huarong was also looking at Tang Jianan, but his eyes were flickering. It seemed that he was feeling extremely conflicted. Looking at everything in the hall, Tang Jianan sighed inwardly. He knew that no matter how much he calculated, he was still lacking this step. Now that things had come to this, he could only follow Zhang Leji's words. Thinking of this, Tang Jianan glanced at eldest senior brother LV Wenkong again. Then, he cupped his hands and said apologetically, "Eldest senior brother, I'm sorry." When Sun Xinjing asked Tang Jianan, LV Wenkong kept staring at him. LV Wenkong was very nervous. He wanted to hear what Tang Jianan had to say. At this point, LV Wenkong also understood that it was useless for him to say anything now. Zhang Leji's words made sense. Even LV Wenkong himself believed that Zhang Leji's words made sense. His engineering skills had indeed reached a bottleneck. If he wanted to break through this bottleneck, he would need a long time to slowly research it on his own. However, it was different with the blueprint. LV Wenkong was confident that he could break through this bottleneck in a short period of time and reach a new height. All this proved that LV Wenkong could indeed steal the blueprint. In order to break through this bottleneck, he would definitely steal this blueprint. LV Winkong knew that it was useless to say anything now. He could only wait and see what everyone else said. If everyone said that he stole the blueprint, then it would be useless even if he said that he didn't steal the blueprint. However, if everyone present except Zhang Liji said that he was suspected of stealing the blueprint and the others said that he was not, then it would be useless to rely on Zhang Liji alone to say that he was suspected. Therefore, LV Winkong stared at Tang Jianan closely. He wanted to see what Tang Jianan would say. This was very important. If Tang Jianan also said that he was suspected, then it would be very important. If Zhang Liji said that he was suspected, then it represented his own opinion. In fact, it wasn't very important. However, if the second person to speak, Tang Jianan, said that he was suspected, then it would form a situation where two people suspected him. LV Winkong knew that after Tang Jianan answered, his master would still ask the rest. He would only make the final judgment after everyone was questioned. At this moment, once Tang Jianan said that he was suspected, it would definitely have a very bad impact. Among the people who followed, even those who didn't dare to speak would also say that he was suspected. For example, 7th junior brother Mei Guangji and 8th junior sister Li Shuyan. They didn't speak much. If they were to speak up for someone, coupled with the fact that he was indeed suspected, they wouldn't make much of a choice. They would say that he was suspected like everyone else. Therefore, Tang Jianan's answer was very important. In LV Winkong's opinion, it was even more important than Zhang Liji's words because Tang Jianan's answer would directly affect the thoughts of the people who answered. Looking at Tang Jianan hesitating there, LV Winkong's heart was almost in his throat. He kept praying in his heart, hoping that Tang Jianan would say that he wasn't suspected. Although he knew that the possibility was very small, LV Winkong had no other choice. He couldn't do anything except pray. Seeing Tang Jianan's gaze turn to him, LV Winkong's heart became more nervous. Looking at Tang Jianan, who wanted to say something but stopped, LV Winkong wanted to go forward and grab him to ask what he was thinking. Or, he wanted him to not suspect him and say that he couldn't steal the blueprint. Of course, all of this was LV Winkong's imagination. The result of the matter depended on Tang Jianan's words. Chapter 157. While LV Winkong was waiting anxiously, Tang Jianan finally turned his head and said apologetically, "Eldest senior brother, I'm sorry." Before Tang Jianan could finish his sentence, LV Winkong, who had been waiting anxiously, suddenly widened his eyes and stared at Tang Jianan in disbelief. "Second junior brother, do you suspect me too? Do you suspect that I stole Master's blueprint?" Tang Jianan looked at LV Winkong's furious expression and could only smile apologetically. Just as he was about to speak, Bai Jianmu, who had been silent with his head lowered, suddenly spoke. "I believe that eldest senior brother is not the person who stole the blueprint." Everyone was stunned when they heard this. After they reacted, they all looked at Bai Jianmu. At this moment, Bai Jianmu was also full of bitterness. He did not want to say this, but if he did not say this, the situation would not be good. Bai Jianmu and Tang Jianan had different thoughts. Tang Jianan was only thinking about the current situation and their current plan. Bai Jianmu was thinking that if LV Winkong was the person who stole the blueprint, then what would Yi Xian do? Didn't this mean that Yi Xian was wronged? If that was the case, then shouldn't Yi Xian be released? If Yi Xian was released, not only would he not be able to inherit the position of the branch leader, but he might not even be able to continue staying in the South County branch leader. Tang Jianan could ignore this situation, but Bai Jianmu could not. Ever since Yi Xian was locked up, he had already made preparations to become the next branch leader. It could be said that as long as Yi Xian was the person who stole the blueprint, then Bai Jianmu would definitely be the next branch leader. Although Zhang Liji would affect his plan, dealing with one person was better than dealing with both Yi Xian and Zhang Liji. Therefore, he would not allow anyone to ruin his plan, especially this kind of plan that was about to succeed. He would not allow anyone to ruin it. Bai Jianmu also knew that if he said that eldest senior brother LV Winkong did not steal the blueprint, then it would cause countless trouble. However, he had to face this kind of trouble. If he did not face it, he would not have a chance. Therefore, he had to stand up and speak up for eldest senior brother LV, Wang Kong, to prove that he was not the person who stole the blueprint. Only then could his plan be carried out and achieve his final goal. Just now, although Bai Jianmu had his head lowered and did not speak, he had always been paying attention to Tang Jinan. He hoped that Tang Jinan would stand up for him in this matter to prove that eldest senior brother LV Wang Kong did not steal the blueprint. However, after his observation, he could tell that Tang Jinan wanted to follow Zhang Leji's words and say that eldest senior brother might steal the blueprint. Bai Jianmu did not want to see such an outcome, so he had to stop it. He must not let this happen. Tang Jinan looked at Bai Jianmu with some surprise. He didn't understand what Bai Jianmu was trying to do. Now, Zhang Leji's words were almost impossible to defend. Could it be that Bai Jianmu could still think of a way at this time? Tang Jinan thought that it was impossible. He had already thought of many ways to deal with it. But after careful analysis, the methods he thought of were useless. In the end, they would also fail. It was precisely because of these reasons that he understood this point and decided to go along with Zhang Leji's words. At the very least, by doing this, his master would not be able to see through any clues. Because if eldest senior brother was not the one who stole the blueprints, would master suspect that the person who said so had ulterior motives when there was such obvious evidence to prove eldest senior brother was not the one who stole the blueprints? Although Tang Jinan and the other two had a plan, they carried it out without arousing his master's suspicion. If his master was suspicious, these plans could not be carried out. Therefore, Tang Jinan thought that following Zhang Leji's words was the only way. However, Bai Jianmu stopped him, which surprised Tang Jinan. He did not understand what Bai Jianmu wanted to say, or was he not afraid of his master's suspicion? Not only was Tang Jinan confused, but the other senior brothers present were also a little confused. Just now, Zhang Leji's words were absolutely reasonable. After thinking about eldest senior brother LV Wang Kong's analysis, everyone thought that it was very reasonable. Therefore, everyone was certain that eldest senior brother LV Wang Kong must be suspected of stealing the blueprint. No one doubted this point. However, Bai Jianmu raised an objection, which made everyone a little confused. They did not know what Bai Jianmu wanted to do. Even Zhang Leji felt a little strange. Even he was starting to believe his own words. Although he thought of those words on the spur of the moment, Zhang Leji thought about it carefully in his heart and became more and more suspicious. Eldest senior brother LV Wang Kong gave up everything and wholeheartedly studied the art of mechanism. In the face of a blueprint that was more valuable than any treasure in the world, would such a person be tempted? Would he have the intention to steal it? Zhang Leji became more and more suspicious. He suspected that eldest senior brother LV Wang Kong might really do that. However, Bai Jianmu raised an objection. Zhang Leji was stunned. Could it be that in this situation, eldest senior brother LV Wang Kong was still not suspicious? Or could it be that Bai Jianmu had conclusive evidence to prove that this matter was not done by eldest senior brother LV Wang Kong? Only in this way could he raise an objection on this matter. Because Zhang Leji knew that as long as Bai Jianmu raised an objection, his master would definitely ask him why he felt that eldest senior brother LV Wang Kong was not the one who stole the blueprint. At that time, if Bai Jianmu was not prepared, how should he answer? This was also something that made Zhang Leji a little confused. In his opinion, Bai Jianmu should have no evidence to prove that eldest senior brother LV Wang Kong was not the one who stole the blueprint. In this way, why would Bai Jianmu do this? Looking at Bai Jianmu's indifferent face, Zhang Leji's heart suddenly moved. He somewhat understood what Bai Jianmu was thinking and also understood what Bai Jianmu wanted to do. Zhang Leji understood that the reason for all of this was Yi Xian. If everyone said that LV Wang Kong was suspicious and thought that LV Wang Kong might have stolen the blueprint, then what would Yi Xian, who was locked up in the Repentance Pavilion, do? If eldest senior brother was the one who stole the blueprint, then shouldn't Yi Xian be released? Zhang Leji understood that as long as Yi Xian was released, then the person who would inherit the position of the next branch master would definitely have nothing to do with Bai Jianmu. This was because Yi Xian was originally the first successor. If there were no accidents, his master would definitely let Yi Xian be the next branch master of the South County branch. This was no longer a secret in the South County branch. Everyone knew about this matter. Not only that, even Sun Xinjing himself had mentioned this matter in front of everyone. Chapter 158. If Yi Xian was released, it would prove that he wasn't a suspect and that he wasn't the person who stole the blueprint. In that case, Sun Xinjing's words would hold true. Yi Xian would become the next leader. Bai Jianmu didn't want to see such a situation happen. Zhang Liji knew this very well. Everything Bai Jianmu had done was probably for the sake of the leader's position. Regardless of whether he had stolen the blueprint or not, he should be willing to see what was happening now. Therefore, Bai Jianmu definitely wouldn't allow this matter to change. If that happened, all his plans would fall through. As for becoming the leader, that would be impossible. Zhang Liji naturally understood why Bai Jianmu was doing this. He also understood that even if Bai Jianmu didn't have a choice, he would stop this from happening. This was because in Bai Jianmu's mind, other than Yi Xian, no one else could be the person who stole the blueprint. Even if Yi Xian really was the person who stole the blueprint, it wouldn't affect Bai Jianmu's decision. Zhang Liji calmed down slightly when he thought of this. He thought about it carefully and felt that there wouldn't be any unexpected changes. Only then did he look at Bai Jianmu again. After Bai Jianmu finished speaking, the person who was most shocked was obviously eldest senior brother LV Wenkong. When LV Wenkong heard Tang Jinan apologize, he already knew what Tang Jinan wanted to say. LV Wenkong's heart sank to the bottom. He grabbed Tang Jinan and questioned him with all his might, trying to get him to change his story. However, LV Wenkong knew that it was basically impossible. After apologizing in front of so many people, it meant that Tang Jinan had already made up his mind to say that he was a suspect and that he might be the person who stole the blueprint. How could he change his story just because of LV Wenkong's questioning? LV Wenkong was furious when he saw Tang Jianan's apologetic face. Tang Jianan's aptitude wasn't too good. Of course, this was only in comparison to his fellow disciples. If he was compared to others, his talent would be considered excellent. It was precisely because of this that LV Wenkong had helped Tang Jianan a lot when he first joined the sect. When Tang Jianan joined the sect at the age of 15, he was still an ignorant youth. When he had problems that he didn't know, LV Wenkong would always guide him carefully. At that time, LV Wenkong thought that he was the eldest senior brother and that he had the obligation to guide his junior brother. It could be said that Tang Jinan's skills were definitely related to LV Wenkong's SS. Looking at Tang Jinan, LV Wenkong recalled the time when Tang Jinan asked him questions when he was young. His naivety at that time had long disappeared with the passage of time. What was left? LV Wenkong remembered very clearly that there was a time when a young Tang Jinan was scolded by his master because he couldn't understand a blueprint. LV Wenkong could still remember the helplessness and grievance on his face. TTTDT, TTS. LV Wenkong could still clearly remember the joy on Tang Jinan's face when he learned the blueprint. LV Wenkong was also very happy when he saw it. All of that had vanished like smoke into thin air. That little junior brother of his had vanished with the passage of time. All that was left was this Tang Jinan, who had apologized to him. LV Wenkong admitted that according to Zhang Liji's words, there was a possibility that he had stolen the blueprint. However, LV Wenkong never thought that even Tang Jinan would think that he was the one who had stolen the blueprint. At that moment, LV Wenkong felt as if a knife was being twisted in his heart. He felt that giving up everything and focusing on studying the art of engineering was the right choice. At least, the art of engineering wouldn't betray him. Tang Jinan didn't feel good when he saw LV Wenkong's gloomy face. Naturally, Tang Jinan remembered eldest senior brother's teachings. However, he could only remember them in his heart. Faced with Zhang Liji's words, Tang Jinan had no way to change them. He could only go with the flow. Otherwise, he would definitely not end up well. Logically speaking, LV Wunkong and Tang Jinan had spent the longest time together, so their relationship should be the best. However, Tang Jinan only respected LV Wunkong because LV Wunkong was like his master. When he encountered difficulties, LV Wunkong would appear in front of him and help him wholeheartedly. Now, Tang Jinan wanted to point out that LV Wunkong was a suspect. Tang Jinan definitely didn't feel good. It was like betrayal. Tang Jinan knew that in LV Wunkong's heart, he was betraying him at this moment. However, what could he do? Although LV Wunkong was the eldest senior brother, he didn't have much influence in the entire South County branch. Tang Jinan knew that with his talent, it was almost impossible for him to stand out in the South County branch. Therefore, he had to choose someone to rely on to ensure his own interests. Tang Jinan didn't want to leave the South County branch, so he had to choose the right person so that he could continue to stay. Just like now, everyone knew that Yi Xian was the next leader. Tang Jinan naturally didn't want to offend him, so he had nothing to say. However, Yi Xian had now become the person who stole the blueprint. He was about to be expelled from the sect and lose the chance to inherit the position of leader. At this moment, Tang Jinan was faced with a choice. He could choose to continue to trust Yi Xian and think that he wasn't the person who stole the blueprint. He could even help him find the person who really stole the blueprint, and then save Yi Xian and continue to work with Yi Xian. However, although this idea was good, it was really difficult to realize it. On the day Yi Xian was locked up, Tang Jinan thought about it for an entire night, but he couldn't think of any way to save Yi Xian. Zhang Leji said that just because Yi Xian knew the location of the blueprint, it was unfair to Yi Xian to determine that Yi Xian stole the blueprint. Tang Jinan knew very well what Zhang Leji said. It was indeed a little too childish to rely on the evidence to prove that Yi Xian was the person who stole the blueprint. However, this happened. Not only that, even his master believed that Yi Xian was the person who stole the blueprint. This was because only Sun Xinjing and Yi Xian knew the location of the blueprint. Under such circumstances, it was extremely difficult for Tang Jinan to find the person who stole the blueprint for Yi Xian. The key was that only his master and Yi Xian knew the location of the blueprint. Other than the two of them, Tang Jinan really didn't know anyone else. Who else would know the location of his master's blueprint? Facing this extremely disadvantageous situation, how should Tang Jinan choose? How should he choose? This was the biggest problem. Chapter 159. If that was the case, Yi Xian was probably the one who stole the blueprint. If that was the case, Tang Jinan felt that Yi Xian was unreliable. He had to find someone else to back him up. Bai Jianmu was undoubtedly the most reliable person besides Yi Xian. This was because if Yi Xian was no longer around, Bai Jianmu would very likely become the branch leader. Tang Jinan believed this very much. It was also because of this reason that Tang Jinan chose Bai Jianmu to help him fight against his enemies. LV Wunkong, who was originally in despair, immediately widened his eyes after hearing Bai Jianmu's words. He stared at Bai Jianmu in disbelief. "Junior Bai, do you really believe me?" Bai Jianmu nodded after hearing LV Wunkong's words. He smiled and said, "I believe you, senior brother. I believe that you didn't steal the blueprint." LV Wunkong's eyes lit up after hearing Bai Jianmu's words. He immediately turned around and looked at Zhang Leji. He said, "How is it? I said that I didn't steal the blueprint. How is it? Does anyone believe me? I believe everyone knows that I, LV Wunkong, would never do such a thing." After Zhang Leji heard LV Wunkong's words, he recovered from his astonished thoughts. Looking at the smiling LV Wunkong, Zhang Leji could only secretly apologize. He then turned his head to look at Bai Jianmu and asked with a smile, "Since Junior Bai said that senior brother couldn't have stolen the blueprint, then tell us your reason. Let's hear it and see how credible it is." Bai Jianmu didn't answer Zhang Leji's question. He turned around and looked at his master, Sun Xinjing. He cupped his fist and said, "Master, do you trust senior brother?" When Sun Xinjing heard this, he was stunned for a moment before he nodded. Of course. Bai Jianmu smiled and nodded. In that case, if senior brother wants to see the blueprint, will you let him see it? After hearing Bai Jianmu's question, Sun Xinjing was really stunned this time. Sun Xinjing was well aware of the value of this blueprint, which was why he didn't show it to his disciples. Sun Xinjing had originally planned to wait for a period of time before considering who to pass the blueprint to. Of course, it was impossible for the blueprint to be shown to everyone. Sun Xinjing was prepared to treat this blueprint as a treasure and give it to the next branch master. The preciousness of this blueprint meant that it was impossible for everyone to see it. He could only choose someone he truly trusted to take a look at it or teach him a little. Sun Xinjing knew that many of his 8 disciples would never see this blueprint in their entire lives. For example, Tang Jianan. Sun Xinjing had never thought of letting him see the blueprint. This was because Tang Jianan's talent wasn't high to begin with. If he were to look at the blueprint, it wouldn't be of much help to him. Moreover, even if he could understand the blueprint, it would take too much time. In addition, there was another reason why this blueprint couldn't be leaked. This was because in this world, the Tianji sect wasn't the only one who researched mechanism techniques. There were many others who were researching mechanism techniques. Once they found out about the secret of mechanism techniques, it wouldn't be a good thing for the Tianji sect. Therefore, Sun Xinjing planned to only pass this blueprint to the next branch master. His initial plan was to pass this blueprint to Yi Xian. Sun Xinjing hadn't thought of passing it to anyone else. This was because he didn't have time to think about it during this period of time. He was completely attracted by this blueprint. Other than the necessary meals and sleep, he spent almost all his time studying this blueprint. At this moment, after hearing Bai Jianmu's question, Sun Xinjing didn't know how to answer. If he said that he originally planned to let LV Wenkong see this blueprint, then wouldn't he be breaking his promise if he didn't let him see it? However, if he said that he didn't plan to let LV Wenkong see this blueprint, then wouldn't LV Wenkong be bitterly disappointed? Under such circumstances, Sun Xinjing was in a difficult position. He didn't know how to answer Bai Jianmu's question. He thought for a moment before slowly replying. I haven't thought about this matter, so I can't answer you now. Bai Jianmu was a little disappointed when he heard this. He had a motive for asking his master this question. If Sun Xinjing replied that he had originally intended to let LV Wenkong see the blueprint, then things would be easier. As long as he said that since LV Wenkong could see the blueprint anyway, then why would he want to steal it? It would be better for him to ask his master for the blueprint directly. That way, he would not be suspicious. However, Sun Xinjing didn't answer that way. He actually said that he hadn't thought about this matter, which put Bai Jianmu in a difficult position. This wasn't his plan. Since Sun Xinjing refused to answer according to his plan, then Bai Jianmu could only think of other ways. Thinking of this, Bai Jianmu turned to look at Zhang Leji and asked with a cold smile, Third senior brother, do you really think that eldest senior brother is suspicious? Would he really steal that blueprint? At the same time, Bai Jianmu thought to himself that as long as Zhang Leji dared to say that eldest senior brother was suspicious and that there was a possibility that he would steal that blueprint, then he would immediately use his power to suppress him and tell everyone about how LV Wenkong had taken care of them all these years. Then, he would drag Zhang Leji down with him and unite all the senior and junior brothers to testify against Zhang Leji. After hearing Bai Jianmu's question, Zhang Leji shook his head and said, I don't suspect eldest senior brother, nor do I suspect that eldest senior brother would steal that blueprint. I just said my own analysis. As for what everyone thinks, that's your business. Speaking of this, Zhang Leji looked around and clasped his hands at the senior and junior brothers. He said again, what I said just now, think about it carefully. Is there such a possibility that eldest senior brother would steal that blueprint? After saying this, Zhang Leji didn't look at Bai Jianmu anymore. Instead, he turned to look at Tang Jianan and said with a smile, Second senior brother, other than eldest senior brother, you are the most senior. According to the order, it should be your turn to speak. Now, second senior brother, please tell us. Is it possible that eldest senior brother would steal that blueprint? After hearing Zhang Leji's question, Tang Jianan was in a dilemma. He didn't think about this question clearly just now. How should he answer it now? Just now, if Bai Jianmu didn't stop him, he would have already said his thoughts. According to Zhang Leji's words, Tang Jianan thought that eldest senior brother LV Wonkong would definitely steal that blueprint. Eldest senior brother's only purpose in life was to study mechanism techniques. With such a precious blueprint in front of him, it was very likely that he would steal it and study mechanism techniques. Tang Jianan wanted to answer this, but Bai Jianmu stopped him just now. This meant that Bai Jianmu didn't want him to answer this way. Instead, he wanted him to deny this matter and prove that eldest senior brother LV Wonkong would never steal that blueprint. Chapter 160. What made Tang Jianan feel troubled was that if he did not answer that way, how should he answer? Say that it was impossible for his eldest senior brother to steal the blueprint. Tang Jianan believed that as long as he said that, Zhang Leji would definitely ask him why it was impossible for his eldest senior brother to steal the blueprint. At that time, how should he answer him? It was because he could not think of a reason why his eldest senior brother could not steal the blueprint that he wanted to answer that his eldest senior brother might have stolen the blueprint. If Zhang Leji asked, how should he answer? Should he say that he did not know? Tang Jianan knew that even if he said that he did not know, it would not work. Because if he did not know, how could he prove that his eldest senior brother did not steal the blueprint? If he pursued the matter, it would be like just now. Unless Tang Jianan stole the blueprint, how could he prove that his eldest senior brother was not the one who stole the blueprint without knowing? This kind of result was not what Tang Jianan wanted, because if he did that, he would be dragged into the water. Although he wanted to drag Zhang Leji into the water just now, if he dragged himself into the water, that would definitely not be a good thing. At this moment, Tang Jianan was hesitant and did not know how to answer. He quietly turned his head to look at Bai Jianmu, wanting Bai Jianmu to help him out. When Bai Jianmu saw Tang Jianan's gaze, he was also in a difficult position. This problem was really difficult to solve. He originally wanted to drag Zhang Leji into the water, but he did not expect Zhang Leji to push LV Wonkong out. This was very difficult to deal with. If it was possible for his eldest senior brother to steal the blueprint, then wouldn't Yixin be fine? According to what Zhang Leji said just now, the possibility of his eldest senior brother, LV Wonkong, stealing the blueprint was much higher than Yixin stealing the blueprint. If everyone unanimously pointed out that his eldest senior brother, LV Wonkong, was the one who stole the blueprint, then Yixin was definitely not the one who stole the blueprint. If Yixin was released, then he would no longer have the chance to become a branch leader. Not only that, he had put in a lot of effort to lock Yixin up this time. It could be said that he had completely offended Yixin. If Yixin was released, and Yixin became the branch leader of the South County branch, what would he do in the future? Bai Jianmu did not believe that Yixin would not take revenge on him for treating Yixin like that. Bai Jianmu believed that after Yixin became the branch leader, he might not take revenge on him at first, but as time passed, he would definitely cause trouble for him. At that time, it would not be easy for him to stay in the South County branch leader. At that time, it would not be easy for him to stay in the South County branch leader. He could only leave. If it was before this incident, he did not believe that Yixin would not do anything to him during the day. However, when he pointed out Yixin, he was the one who worked the hardest. Yixin would definitely bear a grudge in his heart. Repentance Pavilion was not a good place. Bai Jianmu knew that Yixin had been locked up in the Repentance Pavilion for the past few days. He was probably thinking about taking revenge on him every day. If such a Yixin was released, it would be a little chilling just thinking about it. Therefore, he could not let Yixin out. The matter of Yixin stealing the blueprint could not be changed. Now, the person who stole the blueprint could only be Yixin. No one else could steal the blueprint. Even if he really stole the blueprint, he could not say that he stole it. Yixin had to be the person who stole the blueprint. Regardless of whether he really stole the blueprint or not, Bai Jianmu knew that this point could not be changed. If it was changed, he would be finished. However, seeing Tang Jinan's gaze, Bai Jianmu was really in a difficult position. Now that master was present, there were some things that he could not say carelessly. He had to say it with reason and evidence. Only then would he be able to gain the upper hand in this matter. If he spouted nonsense, he was afraid that even he would be suspected. This was because everyone knew the purpose of doing so. Other than framing someone else, there was no other reason. Especially since everyone knew that he was Yi Xian's strong rival in the competition for the branch master position. Under such circumstances, if he spouted nonsense, everyone would definitely be suspicious and suspect that he had ulterior motives. Therefore, whether it was just now or now, Bai Jianmu did not want to speak unless it was a critical moment. The main reason was, of course, that he did not want to get into trouble. But now there was a big problem. Whether or not eldest senior brother was a suspect was no longer important. What was important was that he could not let eldest senior brother be suspected. But how should he do it? To be honest, Bai Jianmu had really not thought about these problems in the past. After hearing Zhang Leji's words, he suddenly felt enlightened. According to Zhang Leji's analysis, eldest senior brother LV Wenkong definitely had the possibility of stealing the blueprint. This was something that everyone understood and acknowledged. Since ancient times, there were many examples of this. It was definitely not strange to steal something back for the sake of one's favorite thing, especially someone like eldest senior brother. His knowledge of mechanisms had reached a certain level. Such a person clearly knew that there was a precious blueprint not far away from him. Even if he wanted to steal it, there was really a possibility that he would do so. Moreover, the possibility was very high. It was so high that it made people somewhat believe that this was the truth. Bai Jianmu looked at Tang Jinan. Seeing his questioning expression, he knew that Tang Jinan did not have any ideas. Tang Jinan wanted to hear his opinion or ask him to help him out of this situation. Turning his head, Bai Jianmu saw eldest senior brother LV Wenkong again. At this moment, eldest senior brother LV Wenkong did not speak, but the expectant expression in his eyes was clearly seen by everyone. Seeing LV Wenkong's expression, some people even thought that eldest senior brother might really have stolen the blueprint. Was he begging for forgiveness? Bai Jianmu's gaze shifted between Tang Jinan and LV Wenkong. In the end, it stopped on Tang Jinan. He suddenly smiled and nodded. Then he said loudly, "Second senior brother, this question is indeed difficult to answer. However, your relationship with eldest senior brother is the best. I think that you won't be able to make any judgment. Why don't we let third senior brother tell us his opinion?" After hearing Bai Jianmu's words, Tang Jinan's heart immediately relaxed. He quickly nodded and said, "Yes, that is indeed the case. My relationship with eldest senior brother is very good. I really shouldn't speak too much. Let junior brother Zhang speak." At this point, Tang Jinan hurriedly turned his head to look at Zhang Leji. He wiped the cold sweat on his forehead and said with a smile, "Third junior brother Bai is right. My relationship with eldest senior brother is very good. I really shouldn't talk nonsense. Third junior brother, please speak. We'll just listen from the side." After hearing Tang Jinan's words, Zhang Leji stared at Tang Jinan without saying a word. Tang Jinan, who was originally a little relaxed, became a little nervous under Zhang Leji's stare. The cold sweat on his forehead that had been wiped off appeared at this moment. He really did not want to answer this question. The key was that he had no way to answer this question. He was about to push this matter away, but after seeing Zhang Leji's gaze, his heart was in his throat again. Chapter 161. Looking at Zhang Leji's gaze, Tang Jinan smiled awkwardly. "Third junior brother, why don't you say it?" Zhang Leji shook his head. "No, we're all fellow disciples, and we usually have a good relationship. If we do as you say, then we can't talk about it anymore. Even what I said just now can't be said." Speaking until here, Zhang Leji turned to Sun Xinjing and cupped his hands. "Master, if second senior brother doesn't want to say it, then this disciple will take back what I said just now and won't interfere in this matter. After Sun Xinjing heard Zhang Leji's words, he was a little angry in his heart. Originally, when he saw Tang Jinan dawdling and not speaking, he was very annoyed in his heart. At this moment, when he saw that Tang Jinan actually didn't want to answer this matter, he was even angrier in his heart. If what Zhang Leji said was true and they were fellow disciples, then there was no need to say anything. Thinking until here, Sun Xinjing slammed the table and glared at Tang Jinan. He asked loudly, "As second senior brother, you don't want to set an example. Instead, you want to avoid this matter. What is the meaning of this?" Tang Jinan knew that something was wrong when Zhang Leji told this to his master. After hearing his master's reprimand, he was so scared that he hurriedly knelt down. "Master, this disciple is just thinking that I have a good relationship with eldest senior brother. If what I said offends eldest senior brother, then wouldn't it be a waste of eldest senior brother's care for me? Master, please understand." As soon as Tang Jinan said this, everyone knew that something was wrong. Bai Jianmu's expression kept changing. If what Tang Jinan said was wrong, then as long as they went against eldest senior brother, then wouldn't they offend eldest senior brother? If that was the case, then who would dare to say anything? Sun Xinjing, who was sitting at the head of the table, was also very unhappy. These people were all his disciples, and they were all cultivated by him. However, this Tang Jinan in front of him actually deceived him in order not to offend eldest senior brother LV Wenkong. The more Sun Xinjing thought about it, the angrier he got. He suddenly slammed the table and shouted, "Don't you know the principle of respecting your master? Could it be that in order to not offend eldest senior brother, you have to lie to me? If you do this, are you worthy of all the grooming I've given you? Tang Jinan, you better think carefully about what you should do." Sun Xinjing's last words were almost shouted out. His voice was so loud that it made Tang Jinan's ears ring. Tang Jinan, who was kneeling on the ground, knew that things were not good after he said those words. However, the words that were said were like water that had been spilled. It was impossible to take them back. Tang Jinan knew that he could only think of a way to remedy the situation. Otherwise, not to mention the future, it was absolutely possible that he would be expelled from the sect by the furious master. Thinking of this, Tang Jinan hurriedly explained, "Master, I was wrong just now. I just wanted to say that we are all fellow disciples, and I don't want to waste our friendship. I really didn't mean anything else. Please forgive me." Tang Jinan was so anxious that he did not know what he was saying. After he said these words, Sun Xinjing was even more furious. "Tang Jinan, in order to not waste our friendship as fellow disciples, did you forget about the relationship between master and disciple?" At this point, Sun Xinjing suddenly slammed the table. This slap was so heavy that even the teacups on the table jumped up from the impact. "Tang Jinan, I took you in as my disciple because I saw that you were a loyal and honest person. But I didn't expect you to be such an ungrateful person. In order not to offend anyone, you would forget about your master." At this point, Sun Xinjing paused for a moment. He took a few quick breaths to calm himself down. Then, he slammed the table again and said angrily, "Tang Jinan, if you don't make things clear today, don't blame me for not taking our relationship as master and disciple into consideration and expelling an unfilial disciple like you from the sect." After hearing Sun Xinjing's words, Tang Jinan was so scared that his face turned ashen. Prostrating himself on the ground, he kowtowed profusely. "Master, your disciple says, please forgive me. Your disciple will definitely say it. Please don't expel me from the sect." Tang Jinan was very wise. He knew his own level and knew that staying in the South County branch was the best choice. Therefore, he chose between Yi Xian and Bai Jianmu as his backer. His goal was naturally to stay in the South County branch. However, no matter how much he calculated, he did not expect that he would actually anger his master. Sun Xinjing rarely reprimanded his disciples. He would only reprimand them if they were too stupid or not focused when they were studying. The key was that Sun Xinjing rarely cared about the matters of the branch. Usually, he would study the mechanism in his room. There were not many things to do in the South County branch to begin with, so everyone made do with each other. In addition, the South County branch also had its own rules. For example, at the Mountain Gate, the people would automatically change every day. Everyone already knew who would pick up the people every day and who should do what. Even without Sun Xinjing's command, nothing would go wrong. The key was that there were not many things to do in the South County branch, so everyone was at peace. After a long time, Tang Jianan actually forgot that his master was the most terrifying existence in the South County branch. Other people did not have the right to make Tang Jianan leave the South County branch. Even if they wanted him to leave, they would only secretly trip him up and force him to leave. However, Sun Xinjing did have the absolute right. As long as he said the word, he could make anyone leave the South County branch. At this moment, Tang Jianan was almost scared silly. He could say anything now as long as he was not expelled from the sect. Looking at Tang Jianan, who kept begging for mercy, Sun Xinjing, who was originally a little frustrated, could not bear it anymore. He suddenly waved his hand and said coldly, "All right, I'll give you another chance. Step aside." Tang Jianan was overjoyed when he heard this. He quickly kowtowed to his master before standing up and respectfully standing to the side. Looking at Tang Jianan, who stood up, Sun Xinjing suddenly said loudly, "Who else is there that doesn't want to say it? Step forward immediately." When everyone heard Sun Xinjing's words, they were all shocked. They hurriedly looked at their master and saw that his face was ashen as he looked at everyone. When everyone saw this, they could not help but kneel on the ground and say loudly, "Master, we don't dare." After hearing the disciples' answers, Sun Xinjing waved his hand. "All of you, stand up and think about what's going on." After saying this, Sun Xinjing sat back down on the chair and picked up the teacup on the table. Just as he was about to drink it, he saw that the tea in the teacup had spilled out, so he immediately ordered the person beside him, "Hurry up and change the tea." That person was already stunned by Sun Xinjing. At this moment, after hearing Sun Xinjing's words, he finally reacted. He quickly responded, picked up the teapot on the table, and ran out. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.